We left off with General Admin, the Tax Commissioner. So Alicia, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, let me start by trying to explain how the Tax Commissioner's Office works a little bit as far as intergovernmental agreement. We have an agreement with the municipalities and school systems to collect their taxes for them. And for doing that, the Tax Commissioner receives $1 for each parcel, and the county receives $8 for each parcel. This past year, that came to a total of about $174,000 in revenue. The portion for the $1 for the Tax Commissioner is paid back to her through that salary line item. And before, we did take that money as a credit against it. Now we're adding that in and then adding the revenue in on the intergovernmental revenue line that we talked about earlier today. We thought that the Tax Commissioner could ask us where we can apply another dollar of that money. But after reviewing the agreement, we found that she can't necessarily dictate that. What she asked for was a bonus for her employees to be paid for that intergovernmental agreement. And so the $34,000 increase in salaries is her part of that intergovernmental agreement plus the bonus for her employees. I just found this out at the end of the week and wasn't able to notate that on here. So I thought that we were obligated to pay that $1,000 bonus because I thought she had the authority to tell us where to spend that. And in reality, she doesn't. So in that line item, if we want to pay the $1,000 per employee bonus to the Tax Commissioner's Office, this line would stay the same. If we didn't, we could reduce that line item by about $14,000.
Okay, I'm not following you there. I mean, I'm not doubting you, but so for instance, if we pass a budget for the sheriff and send it to him, and he's been very good about following obviously what they present, but my understanding is he technically has the power to adjust that. So you're saying the manner in which she's trying to adjust to give her employees, you're saying is she does not have that capability. Is there a reason why, or?
Well, we...
Wait a minute, so she gets $1 off collections?
Correct. Per parcel, for herself.
For herself?
Yeah, the intergovernmental agreement calls for her to get $1 per parcel that's paid to her.
And so, looking at the $34,000 right here that she wants extra, she wants to take money from that intergovernmental agreement, that money she collects, and use it for her salaries?
She wants to take the county's portion. So the county gets $8 per parcel.
She wants to take the county portion.
That's right.
Use it for her.
She wants to take $1 of the county's money and apply it to her budget.
What I heard.
Which historically she's done, but she hasn't done it for salaries. She's done it for office supplies and postage, and I think maybe one year they used it to buy some computers. So historically she has been allowed to do that, but the intergovernmental agreement does not state that that has to be done. It's just...
So it's not necessarily challenging that she's a constitutional officer and she doesn't have powers within that. It's the manner in which that money's being collected and the interruption of that money is what you're saying is technically what's being challenged, correct?
No, she's going to take $1 from the $8 we collect that they give us. She's going to take $1 from us and use it for her bonus.
That's correct.
But that's my whole point. You're not challenging that as a constitutional officer, she doesn't have fluctuations to control the budget. What you're saying is that's a specific manner in which revenue is collected on our behalf that maybe the attorneys need to weigh in, I don't know. But I'm trying to understand.
Because that's our dollar, and she wants to use it. I believe she's asking for the budget increase in that amount, and that money has been going to the county's revenues, and she's just asking for a budget increase for her office that she can spend how she wants, but she's telling me how she wants to spend it. But that's what she's asking for, a budget increase. And she's saying that she's a revenue generator, generates $8 into the county, and she just wants another dollar of that to go to her.
Now, historically, that has happened, and I don't know if that was through a gentleman's agreement, or gentleperson's agreement, but,
And why this year's salary, in other words, I did a brief comparison for the next department, but I won't get there yet. I saw a couple of departments that got no increase, some even declined in personal services, and then some got very moderate. Hers is toward the top at 6.3%. I'm just saying, why would you want to use this for bonuses when we haven't given bonuses across the board except for our
well, I think she's, I mean, I didn't ask that question to her, and I probably shouldn't answer it on her behalf, but I think she's looking out for her employees.
Okay.
And the concern is not for what's happening in other areas, just for what's happening in the tax commissioner area, I think. But,
So have you included that?
that is included because I thought
Okay.
that the intergovernmental agreement called for that. And after I researched it and read the intergovernmental agreement, I realized that the intergovernmental agreement doesn't call for that, that we just allowed that to happen in the past. And I don't know what the history is on that. So, but she does get the 20,000 of the 34, she gets. And that is included in the intergovernmental agreement. Now, in the past, what we've done is we've credited that back when we got the check, rather than taking all that money in revenue, we've credited back the amount for her salary. Whereas now, we're going to take the whole thing to revenue. So in the past, we would have taken 153 to revenue and put 20 of it against her salary. Now we're going to take the full 173 to revenue, take 20 against her salary, or 20 against her salary, or 20 for her salary, and 14 more for bonuses for that department. But I wanted to be clear that the 14,000 is an option of the board to approve or not approve. And as a constitutional officer, I don't know about her authority to be able to tell us. I mean, I know what you're saying with the sheriff, and I think she probably would have the same authority.
Yeah, I don't think the authority to tell us, but the authority, once it's given to her, she has the ability to fluctuate
Rearrange
it
it.
from there.
Yes.
I want to make clarification. So the employees that work for the tax commissioner are Carroll County employees. They just work underneath the tax commissioner. So I don't want to separate us out too much. They are Carroll County employees that work underneath the tax commissioner.
So that they got the raise, they get the last raise?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So what? I guess-
They're on our health insurance, so they are Carroll County employees, they're just under the authority of the tax commissioner.
I'm all for taking care of county government employees, especially I would say our public safety, which has been somewhat deficient over the last several years. But this kind of brings up in my mind a little bit of inequity, because if we're giving raises in one department, I mean, the public doesn't know the technicalities of, well, this is a constitutional officer, this one isn't, or whatever. So, and how does it make our other county employees feel? What, the tax commissioner's office has 14 employees, so how do the other 599 employees feel when 14 get a 6% raise?
Bonus.
Yeah, and they find out, well, board of commissioners approved that, so it's like we're all of a sudden into this, view
and that's why I wanted,
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to say that, because it wasn't explained here, and I wanted to say that so that you understood what you were voting on, that you were, that you possibly were voting for an inequity.
Right. So 14,000 of the 34,4 is our discretion.
Right.
One of the things that I think we've got to be tasked with moving forward is there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of confusion to some degree about constitutional officers, who reports where, public safety, all these different things. What I think we do owe all of the employees is we owe them a roadmap. Now, if we want to prioritize this year, we're only going to give public safety. I'm just making this up. I'm not saying that's in this budget. But that doesn't mean then we'll just get to the rest later. If we're going to roll out something for one, we need to have some kind of uniformity of how we're going to tackle a plan so all the employees, whether they get the same amount or whether they get something a year from now versus now, there's some kind of equity that all the employees understand they're at least on the roadmap instead of taking it a chunk at a time and we're not thinking about the others as we try to fund this. So, and I don't know what that looks like. I just think that's what we need to try to make sure we're focusing on.
And I'll say this, if we've given everybody a raise across the board, and they were included in that, then this is not fair to turn around and give them that bonus. That's Commissioner Clinton.
Well, I think, remember I told y'all, sometime in the middle of June, we will do a budget amendment.
Right.
At that time, depending on what the money left over is, how we want to spend it, could be in bonuses. So if you choose to do it in this budget right here, you may choose not to let this department get it in June. So I just want to remind you, or we cannot do it here. Then in June, when we do our budget amendment, we do all across the board. So
Which is what I think we should do. We can do it across the board. Can we do it across the board for everybody?
So can we do a consensus, because we're not supposed to vote at this meeting?
Right, there's no official vote.
No official vote, but I think I'm hearing, can I correctly say that? I'm hearing that we should take the 14,000 out, or approximate, confirm that, out of this and put it back into probably the contingency line, because that's our catch-all line right this moment. And then we will revisit bonuses for all employees or capital improvements or whatever at that budget amendment. Is that okay to say that in?
I agree with where we're kind of going with that. One thing I'd like to do too, though, can that be contingent upon us talking with the tax commissioner? I'm not saying she's going to jump up and say, oh, that's totally fine. But if she's been used to, in years past, this is how it's been going, and then all of a sudden it can't, I think we owe it to the constitutional officer through the chairman or through the finance director to have that conversation. This is kind of where the board is seeing this. The reason we're bringing this to you is because in years past, it was under a different assumption. I think we owe that to the tax commissioner.
I'm good with having.
Okay, so let me just make sure I have my instructions. So on Monday, I can call her and say the board would like to remove the 14,000 and revisit it at a budget amendment. Because she says no, she doesn't agree, where do y'all put me in that? I'm asking you, what role, what's my instructions?
The 14,000 is hers anyway, isn't it?
No,
Isn't
No,
that the dollar,
no,
that's
it's
not the
the
dollar
Carroll
that,
County.
That's the county's.
So
That comes out of the $8.
she gets and this is very common across the state of Georgia.
yeah, she
Look over
gets
the
a dollar,
article.
I understand on
That's
every
right,
parcel.
and that's
That's
the
what the
25.
14,000's made up of.
No, out of the
Okay.
$8 is what, so her dollar that she gets, her 20,000 she gets herself, she's not
Okay.
offering the 14,000 out of that.
Gotcha.
She's offering the 14,000 out of.
Got you, I understand.
So,
I thought it was hers anyway, I thought it was the dollar on the parcel.
I know. but
See,
that's-
I thought that going in too, but
Yeah.
after I read the intergovernmental agreement, I
And if
couldn't
she
find
wanted to
it.
offer that, it is her money then, at that point. She could do that, I would believe, because that's actually hers,
Right.
the rest is ours, so.
That's at
I
her
would-
discretion, yeah.
So I'm just asking, what instructions do you want me to give, because.
Well, I think if there's heavy pushback, you can get in touch with the board from there. I mean, I'm not trying to leave it completely open-ended. I'm just saying if we've had something in place that now has come to our attention is not necessarily the right protocol or the right way, I don't think we just go back and tell her, no way, Jose, we'll visit you in June. I think we have a real conversation and see. I mean, I think the tax commissioner is a very reasonable person, and I would just like to hear, you know, her understanding, since this seems to be different than the way maybe the protocol's been done in the past.
Has she paid bonuses out of this before, or just paid, we just put the,
Not to my knowledge.
okay, so that's the difference. I think it's
My knowledge of the past is that she's applied it to office supplies or computer expenses or.
which it
other
is our
line items
ink, it is
within the
our,
budget,
I mean,
but-
it is all Carroll County's equipment, paper, ink, anyway. I mean, the tax commission's office just happens to be a revenue generator, whereas lots of departments don't have that luxury.
But if it went for supplies, computers, or something like that, it wouldn't be such a, let's say, slap in the face to the other 599 employees. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think we've talked about more and more
Yeah.
often about how we address going into the future, about how we give our employees bonuses, or we do some type of employee evaluation, things like that.
Yeah.
At some point, we got to stop and get that fixed before we move forward and allow people to have bonuses, because it is a slap in the face.
So what I will do is, I think I'll make a courtesy call that in this discussion today, you felt that we needed to wait to treat all Carroll County employees as fairly as possible. Okay.
Well, it sounds like salaries and bonuses are pretty good, lowered in. We're the ones that give salaries and bonuses, not the department. Right?
Correct.
But in the same note, that may apply specifically in how this money is being allocated in this one line item because it's a revenue. But in generalization, a constitutional officer, while I think all of our constitutional officers present fair budgets that they want us to approve, the reality is they have a separate set of rules than a Ben Skipper or a Tim Pageant that report directly to our chairman. They have the power within the Constitution, so to speak, to rearrange that budget after we give them the chunk of money. So I hear what you're saying as far as fairness, but the legality of it is they do have different powers than the department heads that report to Michelle.
And if, when we give our employees a raise, and we didn't give them the raise,
Correct.
then I would say, leave this in here and let her do what she needs to do, because we don't deal with them anyway. But in the reality that when we give, anything we do for Carroll County employees applies to hers, then across the board, we're dealing with it. I don't think we work with the sheriff's office like that. I mean,
Yeah. And remember, this is
they
an
have their own, way of doing things, and we don't deal, we give them a lump sum, and then they just kind of dig it out where they want to do it. And if it was the same with her, I could see saying, okay, well, yeah, let her keep it. But since we take care of them too across the board, then across the board, before we go call this a bonus, give somebody a bonus, we got other employees out here that's going to be looking too, saying, well, where's our bonus? I mean, I think that's just.
We do have to remember, this is an intergovernment agreement.
Yes,
This is what's different than the others. So, yes, the funds given here, she can rearrange, but it's the intergovernmental agreement that the cities and the school boards technically could hire another company to do their own billing. They just choose to do it through us. That's how we have this extra funds, if you want to call them extra. Still has to do the ink, the paper, and everything else, and the postage. That comes out of that $8. Okay?
Okay, the other line items that she asked for increases on was, computer services and, postage and office supply and expense. The computer services, her maintenance agreements are going up, so that's why she asked for an increase there. Postage, she just felt like she was going to need more to run her department with, or she has to mail all the tax bills out, and I don't know what else, but they do run a lot of mail through there. And then the office supply and expense had been, that's part of what she had used that intergovernmental agreement for in the past. So she kept those were actually ran a little bit more, but she offset it with some of that money that she received back. So she's asking for an additional amount there. So the total request was 42,000. And if we take out that 12, that would be about a $28,000. All right, the tax assessor. What the tax assessor's office has proposed is eliminating their temporary labor and converting that to a full-time position and adding some additional money there to hopefully bring on a new chief appraiser at some point down the road. And there's been a couple of people that have acted as supervisors in the past who have not been compensated as such. So they've asked for increases for two of the people in that department to get them up to a supervisory rate, so they'll be paid for the things that they're being asked to do. We've added a little bit of money for Social Security and retirement for hiring a new chief appraiser. And they have renegotiated their contract with GMAS, so they have actually decreased their contractual services by $22,500. They asked for an additional $2,000 in office supply expense for additional letters, toner, and paper for appeals. Now, the $40,000 that's currently in the budget for personal property tax audits will not, some of that will be spent in 2020, but all of that will not be spent. And as the director of the board, or the chairman of the board of assessors, looked at the budget, he feels like that the tax assessors will be, departmental budget will be about $100,000 under for FY20. They had several positions that they couldn't fill, and so they're going to have savings in their salary line. They are not spending all of that property tax audit money, and there may have been another line, but when it's added up, all said and done at the end of the day, they feel like they're going to have about $100,000 left. And what they would like to do is take that budget savings and buy the pictometry that we've talked about for the last couple of years. Now, I don't think, as a part of this budget, we don't need to. I just wanted to throw that out there while we were on the tax assessor. Again, that would be handled, well, if they're $100,000 under their budget, then we would just move the money from the line items that are under budget into that pictometry line and pay for the pictometry. And I don't even think that wouldn't even have to be a budget amendment because they would have the money in their budget to do that.
Then let's just go out and buy, big conferences going out there, it's equal to you now. That's drones, so they can just go out and buy drones without us giving a.
I think that there has to be a contract with a pictometry company who actually fly these things. I'm speaking way out of turn because I don't know that much about pictometry, and I don't know.
Well, they're not random. They sold out, it's not legal now.
Well, I think we're just using that as a generic term, like
Yeah.
a car. It doesn't mean it's a Cadillac or Toyota, we're just saying a car. Same thing with pictometry.
Still drones, I mean, that's what we're looking at.
But is it not a contracted service?
It's a contracted service, but it's
Okay.
still drones flying.
Okay.
I'd like to, please note, none of my comments, yes, I'm running for reelection, thank you very much, but this doesn't have anything, dang thing to do with James Ford or anybody else. I've been on cases with tax assessor office for longer than the campaign. And I am for county employees. I think they do a great job. I'm particularly for county government that I feel strongly is the epitome of how you do not want your county government to operate. And they are inefficient. Everywhere I go, I hear complaints about them. I heard from 2 county department heads that have told me, I hope you can make some changes there in tax collector's office because I can't get anywhere with them. And I'm up to my ears with problems with tax collector's office. They have no accountability, and it really bothers me that we're now we're rewarding an advocate here, which we don't do with a 2-year-old, much less with employees. We're giving raises to supervisors when we have no data at all that shows what they are supervising and the effectiveness and efficiency by which they are supervising. So I wanted to, I spent on the board of equalization for a while, long enough to learn, along with you, Susan, that there are significant inefficiencies with the tax system. And to even think about them going out and buying more equipment and pickpocketing and we giving money to them for now rewarding their supervisors, I guess they're doing such a grand job. But it just is totally baffling. I really can't put my arms around that. If we're going to give their supervisors raises, I mean, I would much rather give supervisors somewhere else some raises.
They haven't been compensated as supervisors.
Well, do
in the
we
past.
know? Okay, so, we have no data, didn't we? What are the number of percent evaluations that they do that have been challenged in the percent of total parties? Of those evaluations, how many have been upheld? Not the kind of no-show accounts, which, change the evaluation, no-show. The number of those that have been overturned, do we know how their time, do they have any time records? they can step up to the plate and do what they're supposed to do, why would we want to give them more money?
So I'm understanding that the $40,000 is already in their budget already, right?
That's
They're
correct.
taking $40,000 and moving it up to the regular salary, right?
That's correct.
Because they want to hire a person down the road. They also want to compensate the two people who have been acting as supervisors, who are not supervisors. They're not getting supervisor pay, but they're acting as supervisors. So they want to compensate them for acting as supervisors to actually make them supervisors.
That's
it.
correct.
And then the $100,000 they want to use for generic pictometry is something we talked about before anyway with them. I mean, you did a good presentation on that before. It's a program that we've been talking about and looking at anyway, way before today. We felt that they needed, but at the moment, we didn't have the money in the budget to even try to provide it. But they're saving $100,000 and using their money to purchase this equipment or to this service. Am I correct?
That's their goal.
Okay.
And another goal is to hire a new chief appraiser.
Right, the chief appraiser, that's
Who
it,
will,
and that's the
who
goal
will
that.
hopefully address some of the situations or all of the situations in time that have been brought to light. So they're working on trying to improve the situation. One by hiring a new chief appraiser, and another by getting pictometry that they think will show. They think the pictometry will pay for itself in the fact that it will bring to light things that are not currently
So I'm
being
sure it
assessed.
lives on the back of the property owner. We can go out, and I mentioned this in both of the Verizon cell tower meetings where I agree with Verizon cell tower in my district. So, on the back of the property owner, now we can scrutinize them even more, and we can know when they break a window pane and replace it, so that we can tax them on the new window pane. We can get this pictometry, and we can do flyovers, and we can really zero in on all the property owners out here that might be getting by with $40 worth of stuff that we don't know. Meanwhile, the cell towers are out there, and I know you can have Jim Swinson on board, he knows it full well. We sat there in meeting after meeting after meeting, where the cell towers would have opposition, and they would have their attorneys, and we would blatantly discuss. The county has no mechanism whatsoever, no audit assurance, no anything, on cell tower equipment to assure that we know the equipment that's on those cell towers and that it is being properly taxed. And I guarantee you that there are tens of thousands of dollars in tax revenue that we could have, and we wouldn't have to touch property owners and fly over any other places or get any of the property equipment if we would get a contract with an audit firm that zeroes in on these cell towers, and we can assure that way that the cell tower, we have a proper inventory of their equipment and they are being properly taxed for that equipment. And I talked with them.
That's underway right now.
Okay, well, good. Well, if that's underway, then we need to push to get that, because that is a great source, a big hole that's out there. And I'm for getting that in place and making industry a little more accountable and making the tax assessor's office a little more accountable for finding revenue, not revenue that they can get on the back of the property. I mean, all of this stuff about flying over property turns a blind eye to all the property we're not flying over, called cell towers, and we don't know a dang thing about what equipment's on those towers. And I talked to Mary Lavely and all the folks there, and they don't know. They said even if we went out there and looked at the cell tower, we wouldn't know what we're looking at. So no, we have to totally rely on them to report the equipment. And other counties do this, and it's not that expensive enough. And it will be a great return on our investment if we go forward.
Yeah, Mr. Fulford is working on that right now. I mean, he's already talked to me about it.
On the, if I can say something here on the pictometry part, and I understand it's a sensitive subject all the way around, and I respect what everybody's talking about here in their own right from their view perspective. One of the things that concerned me before, and I understand like when we have our audits, we have little things that may say, okay, there's only 3 people in one department, and you get a small ding on the audit, right, that basically says, I wish you could have more internal control, but you don't have 12 people in this one department to spread it out. So it's kind of like it's there, but it's also understood why it's there. So one of the things that caught my concern was that the tax assessor's office had been deemed in their audit 2 years in a row for not having an updated flyover. And I'm not disagreeing with anything that Ernie is saying or the concerns that Steve say. I guess all I'm saying, when I followed up with other information and talked to experts, they were saying it will pay for itself. And a lot of this was not, in other words, it's gonna be a whole piece of property that timber was cruised off of, and they didn't report that. That's the kind of stuff they were saying, blatant disregard of not paying anything that you would find. So I'm not even trying to press, is it needed or is not. I want to respect what Ernie and Steve, some of their concerns. I guess though, if I go back to the root of why I was told this was brought to us, it's because there was an audit issue. So if we're challenging to say, hey, we think that's an invasion of privacy, or we don't think that should be going on, then I think we need to be having a conversation with the auditors to say, tell me in state statute, or tell me why you're dinging us because we feel like this is an invasion of privacy. And I'm fine with having that discussion too. But a lot of this originated from auditors coming in and telling that department, we're dinging you year after year because you've let the span go for too long to run off of a standard of how you're applying taxes, so our evaluations. So I think there's maybe a way that we can respect everybody's wishes if we could go back to that core reason of saying, why is it on the audit? If we want to challenge that, I'm fine with that. But that's how this all originated. I don't think it's they came up that they just wanted to spend it. The auditors were telling them, you've let the lapse go too long in between having a pictometry flyover. So if we want to challenge the state or whoever the audit firm is, I'm behind that too. But that was the core reason why this came to us 2 years ago or a year ago.
And it is the state. It's state mandates.
Our state mandate, we have to use this.
That we have to
Now,
have.
I'm gonna tell you why I'm so sensitive. I mean, everybody in here knows I did surveillance in the Navy, that's what I did. Okay, we may be using surveillance to look for one thing, but guess what?
Right.
We found out a whole lot of other things that really wasn't any of our business. But did we use it? You dang right we used it. So, when you turn something like this loose, they're gonna get a whole lot more than just going out and taking pictures of property and saying, we're gonna tax it. Trust me.
And I'm respecting what you're saying.
I did it for a living, so,
And I get what you're, right, I totally agree, but the real reason we ever thought about it, or even came to our attention, was because of the audit. That's why we started, said, okay, well, we're
I
getting
did have a
big.
talk with the state about what they're doing.
And that's my point.
Yeah, I really, I guess, I would say, I don't care what the option is, but.
Yeah, well, we do care, because it's a state law, so I'm not gonna say I don't care, but we do care.
And they have found us.
They need to, my thing about pictometry is, it is more and more and more and more scrutiny of property owners while we're leaving industry out there, the cell tower industry is going to the four winds, we don't have a clue as to what we should be getting revenue on. But we can buy a whole lot more equipment, fly over everybody's house and look in their bedrooms or whatever we want to do with it. And we can scrutinize the property owners, but we're not even touching or glancing at the cell tower industry. And if we are now, terrific, we're finally trying to take steps. That's my thing. It's not so much that I'm against pictometry, although I do agree with Steve. It's that let's do something with the industry side where we have tens of thousands of dollars and no clue of what's going on there. Or the property owner is already under scrutiny by these people supposedly going out in their vehicles and already reviewing what's there. So that, I will say that I don't know if they need pictometry or if they just need to get up and go out a little bit more, to the places that they visit. If we are leaving tens or hundreds of acres, I mean, I know you just use that as an example.
Yes.
If they don't have a clue about 300 acres out there that's been harvested, or 50 acres out there that's been harvested, and they need a drone, no, I mean, they need to be going out there now and making sure that. I have heard from inside the office and outside the office that these folks are not going out to parcels as they should evaluate property. That is a problem. And that's one of my things that I would like to see, that maybe if we get a new director, chief grader in there or whatever, we can get some management that makes these folks do what they're supposed to do. That's why I'm against the supervisor. Tell me that they're already doing supervisory work efficiently and effectively, and I'll support the increase. But
Ernie, can I ask you a question on the pictography? If you and Steve would be amenable, and like I said, I respect what y'all are saying, I'm not arguing, but trying to come to, just on that one portion of the pictography, would you all be amenable if we allowed our chairman or maybe one of our attorneys to try to meet with the not let the auditors go to the tax assessors and it channel back around, but either meet directly with our chairman or directly with one of our attorneys, Stacy or Avery, and let them hear firsthand about how serious they think that audit is or not? I mean, would that be a starting point of how this originally came to us, is what I'm saying?
I guess my point to the auditors would be, well, thanks very much for pointing out that we don't scrutinize the property owners enough yet. Thank you.
But Ernie, the caveat, I'm not arguing, my caveat is you were an auditor yourself. If you placed an audit and I disagreed with it, I can't say I'm just not going to listen to Ernie. I can challenge you, but I would need you to come tell me and say, this is why I truly believe in it. So I'm just saying, even by your own profession of what you retired from, I'm respecting what you're saying, but I don't think as a board, we can just sit up here and say, we're not going to pay attention to those audits. We can challenge it. We can say we don't think it's on the priority list, but I don't think we're at freedom to say we're just going to ignore it. They're auditors, they came from the state, they put it on there. I might be, when I find out more, I might be 100% that we don't need to do it. All I'm saying is that's how the conversation originated, and we need to have a conversation independent of it channeling through the tax assessors to see how, how.
And I'll just say that, I mean, if it's a requirement of the state and we're not following it, there's risks and costs associated with that as well.
Well, that's fine. I understand that. But my point to the auditors would be, where does your audit note their finding, or wherever they're calling it these days? Where's your finding on the industry side? Where's your finding that we don't have any process in place, admitted by the tax assessor's office repeatedly in BOE hearing, we don't have a clue as to the cell tower industry and our tax revenue, all of that. We don't have a clue. Where's your note on that?
I think we've determined that that's happening, that they're getting ready to have that done. I think Alicia has stated that. Am I correct? In the last few minutes, you stated it several times, that the cell tower thing is being taken care of. So we will see some revenues from that next year.
Okay. So if we're scrutinizing the industry side, then I'm for saying, well, now maybe we can get toward more efficiencies on the property owner side. But I'm just not for overburdening and finding everything we could possibly find wrong on the property owner side when we're letting the cell tower industry just free will it. As far as needing pictometry, I have heard from inside and outside that these folks are not going out and evaluating property. They're in the car, going out to select and so on. I have no data. I just have permission. That is a problem. I think we need to implement some subdivision carry the county. In other words, let the sales of the subdivisions account for the parcel sales, and rather than we go out and evaluate all the parcels, we'll just use what's going on in the subdivisions. And the person that's the second in charge there, so I've heard, is advocating that. And she says, let the subdivision carry the county, so we don't have to get our luck and go out there and look at the parcel. And if you look at the gas and oil, it kind of validates that, because I just did a brief thing, $2,000 with gas at, let's just pick a number, $1.80 a gallon. That's 1,111 gallons, at 20 miles a gallon is 22,220 miles. So 22,000 miles, the average family car, so other people and all those estimate about 15,000 miles. So we're not even doing much more than one family car as far as going out and evaluating property. That doesn't seem real to me. I mean, if we've got how many thousand parcels we have out there, both on the commercial side and the residential side, we don't pick up. Yeah, they may be getting by with 100 acre charges and we don't know about that, but I don't think that's very much gas and oil. I don't think we're doing what we're supposed to do. And on the postage, if you go to the circuit court's office that runs the BOE, they will tell you that they are sending out way too much mail. They are filing way too many appeals that could be handled at the tax assessor's office. This is straight from the circuit court's office. They are handling way too much stuff that could instead be handled at the tax assessor's office and negated there, and agreed to there at the tax assessor's office. And there's the 3-year thing. So, yes, if they file a form, so-and-so, F-226 or whatever the form number is, if the board signs that, the property owner still gets the 3-year stay on the evaluation. But why do we have to pay for a lot more postage when postage last year and the year before that, when I was on BOE, I mean, already they are sending out all of these appeals unnecessarily and taking them over to the clerk of court's office, and we're paying BOE $400 or $500 a day to hear these and so on, when we can, when I would say 70% of what goes over there is handled rapidly, and there's an agreement between the property owner and the tax assessor. There was no need for them to come. And the clerk of court would say, appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal is like that. And they could instead have handled it without all these other costs of the county, including postage, and handled it in the tax assessor's office. But they just don't do it. They refuse to agree with the property. And that's the complaints that I'm getting out in the field, is they don't tell me a thing about why my taxes went up. When they do, they get information like I did, which I won't get into, of why mine went up. That doesn't make a beans of sense, and they provide no criteria. And yet they will not agree there to any change. They'll waste all the county money. They'll go over to BOE, waste the clerk of court's money, and the BOE hearing money, $500 a day probably. And they'll hear the cases over there, and within 2 minutes or 4 minutes of sitting down, they'll get an agreement with the property. Well, why couldn't you have done that 6 weeks ago before wasting all this money in the tax assessor fund? They just there's a lack of customer service. There's an obstinance on their part to handle things efficiently. And that's my problem with the tax assessor. I mean, and we're going to reward them by paying their supervisors more, and we're going to reward them by giving them more money for postage. I mean,
Can I ask
talk to the clerk of court.
Can I ask a question of Stacy or Avery? So I know we have an appointed board there, and I know we have a vested interest, obviously, to hope that the tax assessor's office is doing an efficient job because we're depending on that revenue and we want that to be fair and balanced with our taxpayers. Is there an ability, and I'm not speaking for Michelle, I guess I'm asking for legality purposes, is there an ability to put an ad hoc committee together, or do we not want to go that route because they already have a governing board? I'm trying to help Ernie. I'm trying to find a medium of how we can not get too far in their lane, but maybe if he has a lot of major concerns, do we work through their board that's appointed from us? Do we not really need to go that route because it looks like we're trying to control their board? I'm trying to find a happy medium that we can address some of Ernie's concerns without it looking like we're trying to control the tax assessor's office that within nature does need to work independently. But if we're questioning efficiencies or mishaps or whatever, where's the happy medium of how we can try to, and I don't know what Michelle might have a different idea, but from a legal perspective.
It would be working with their board members, so we could have a joint work session with their board, or have a committee, subcommittee, made up of one or two of their members, one of your members, to talk about those issues, something like that. We could be working directly with their board that is appointed by this board and that is in charge of their office and their budget.
Michelle, would you feel comfortable trying to put a few people together and us work? And Ernie, would that help you if we could then communicate with their board? I'm trying to help all of us to figure out so it doesn't look like either they got what they wanted or we got what we wanted, but how can we work through some of your concerns to their board? Would you be willing to do that if the chairman would allow it?
Yeah, fine. I mean, I just want some efficiencies coming. I think we'll get there. I mean, hearing that there are going to be staff changes at the top, that's good. Hearing that they're now finally moving forward, getting a handle on self-help, good. I mean, we might be trending in that direction. I was saying at the same time, I see budget increases here, but I'm like, oh my word, I know from being at BOE, these were problems, and it just seems like we're, you know.
Their overall budget's gone down by.
Their budget has gone down overall, period. We're not increasing their budget, but they're actually using the money that they have to do other things with. So we're not increasing their budget. But what you're talking about is structure on the inside, efficiency on the inside.
The reason it went down, just a minute, the reason it went down in large part is the contractual services for GMAS. That accounts for why it went down.
Right, that's good.
Rightly so. I mean, GMAS was there, they were brought in when the county got in the pickle, 5, 6, 8 years ago, when they had the hefty fine and so on. I mean, so it's not, just because the budget went down, it's not indicative that they're all of a sudden being efficient. The budget's gone down because they don't need 6 GMAS staff there all of a sudden, and they get by with maybe a lesser GMAS staff to help them out.
We're not saying they're more efficient, like Commissioner said. That's not what we're saying. We need to create another committee or something to work with them to figure out the efficiencies. That's not what we're doing.
Because to address your issue, even if we deny the pictometry, even if we deny the additional of the supervisors that are supposedly doing that work, and even if we do that, that is not addressing the core foundation of what you've laid out. And I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but I'm just saying to address your concerns as a commissioner, it's not just about giving them the money or not, it's about going deeper for you to be able to collaborate through our appointed board. So that's what I'm saying. It's past just the money. It's to address everything you just got done saying. We've got to work even further.
Right, and you remember that when Sarah Gay was here doing our facilitation of the end of the year retreat, he said, I've turned around the Coweta County Tax Assessor's Office, we have the same problem, very poor customer service, inefficiencies in the office, so I would glad to volunteer my time to go over and work on it. I understand that he meant once. I also understand that the chairman walked out of that meeting rather than after started. I don't know if that's true or not, whatever it is. I don't know where that's at as far as Claire working with them, but that was another
like to propose we stick with this budget right here for the simple fact that it does have a chief appraiser in there. It also has with the budget, if the chief appraiser feels that these people who are working in a supervisor position, they will need to be compensated, correct, Ann? That if he or she finds out next August, September, October, that they are doing supervisor role, we do have to compensate them. So I would like to leave the funds in there to hire the chief appraiser. I'd like to leave the funds in there that if the employees are doing the role that they are supposed to be doing, we have to compensate them correctly. I am happy to, when the new person starts, guessing that once we approve this budget June 2nd, they can proceed to advertise it and hire someone. When that new person begins, as I've always done with any department head, you are welcome to go sit down and have an appointment with them and discuss these things individually and to follow up. And then if we still need a committee come next October, November, I'm happy to put one together. But I hear that you have some problems, and I think it may be best that you sit down directly and address it with the new chief appraiser so that person knows going into the job what he or she may need to fix. And if there's anybody else that has a few concerns, it might be best in a one-on-one situation. And then if we still feel a few months into it, I'm happy to, if any of you want to volunteer, to put a committee together. But I think to put a committee together right this moment, we don't know if this person's going to start July 1st, August 1st, and they need, I think, a few days or weeks to get into the job and see what it is and isn't doing. And if we are hiring someone with the skill set, they're going to recognize the inefficiencies or ways to do this department better if necessary. So yeah, I would like to propose the budget as is. We know, Tommy, I and George, that what it's like to be fined from the state, and money going to the state does not make it productive for any of us. It's money we would like to keep here. So if the audit requires that we do some form of pictometry, that we leave it to the Board of Assessors that we have appointed to represent us, and they are taxpayers living here in Carroll County, that they will know best the form of service to meet the audit's needs. So I would like to leave this budget as is. Does not mean it's necessarily going to get all spent, but I would like to leave it as is.
When is the cell tower audit contract or function, or when is that going to be initiated?
I don't have an
think
exact
they're
moment.
negotiating with them right now. I don't know how far into the negotiations they are. It was just brought to my attention that they felt like that was something that needed to be addressed, and that they were pursuing that. They are talking with a company about doing it. So it's to the point that they found at least one company, and maybe they found multiples and they're getting bids. I'm not sure. It was just brought to my attention that they were in the process of getting that started. And the hope is that some of the other beneficiaries of that would help with the cost of it. But I think that was part of the discussion that was trying to be had too, was, the school board probably will benefit more from this than anybody. And so if they could help with some of the cost of that audit, that'd be helpful.
And I could address that, they considered a cell tower agreement at their last meeting. There were some points that needed to be negotiated with the company, and we're actually negotiating that agreement with the company right now. I was at their last meeting when they talked about the cell tower agreement, and they actually said we're going to table this to our next meeting, and there were some contract points that needed to be negotiated before they entered into that contract.
That contract will come before the board, this board, right? I think it did the last time they did.
It's addressed to the Board of Assessors, so usually, I think they're approving it.
Okay, well, I think the last time they did one of those,
They did.
that it came forward, maybe I don't.
I'm not sure what the final.
We had a contract with ARC. They did it, several counties did it
Okay.
together and got a much better rate, but they did it through Atlanta Regional Commission.
Ernie, do we know that when this was presented, did they run this by their board before it came to us? Do we know that or not?
This budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes, this came from the Board of Assessors. This budget came
So it wouldn't just be the department head, is what I'm asking.
Correct. This, because, like I said, we have 15 department heads, but there again, we have, each one is so different and who
Right.
oversees them. This particular budget came from the Board of Assessors with input from the current chief appraiser.
One other thing, too, much like a constitutional officer, this board is a separate board, and they have a legal level of control over their budget. So if they're moving stuff around in their budget, they might have that right to do that, depending on the line items that they're moving around. So they have, again, just like a constitutional officer, they're not under your direct authority or control of their board members. So they can move things around in a certain way.
I just don't want to blindly, like, the two things about me, that this additional money for letters, governor, and papers is for appeals. And I know from talking with the clerk court office that there's a lot of waste and inefficiency in the manner that appeals are handled. And it's, the majority of those appeals don't need to be appeals. So I guess I hesitate to say, oh, yeah, that additional $2,000 next year, yeah, here's more money for handling appeal stuff. When I know that last year and the year before that, it just was a very inefficient system. And the majority of stuff that they sent over to the third court to appeal didn't even need to be appealed. So I guess I just have a little bit of problem saying, here's more money for people. And on the supervisor side, the problem I have is we don't know, I mean, they've been rocking along, how many years have these quote unquote supervisors been here, doing what they're doing, and nobody's wanting to give them an increase. I mean, why all of a sudden do they need an increase for being a supervisor? Have they not been a supervisor before? And if they're a supervisor and performing well, then we wouldn't have some of the problems with them here that they have. And yeah, maybe that's going too far. I mean,
Do I have a consensus from everybody else on this budget going forward, the way it is presented?
If I could say, I respect, whether I agree with everything or not, I respect what you're trying to accomplish. I think for me, not that I'm going against you, Ernie, but I'm saying for me, if this was just a department head that reported to the chairman, it might be even a little different. But if we have an appointed board, I'm not saying that everything you brought up is not legitimate. But to Michelle's point, if we're having to move forward with the budget, I don't know that all this can be fixed overnight. And the fact that we do have appointed board members, and I know that you had a gentleman that was highly qualified that we put on there that you recommended, to me that maybe is the tipping point that at least we do have another level that there's supposed to be some oversight. That doesn't mean that they don't need to fix things, but for us trying to move forward and keep going, I don't know how we sit and tell them no when it didn't come just from the department head, it also went through an appointed board. So that to me is kind of the tipping point of, let's get to this, but I don't know that we can stop it today.
yeah, I got
We
it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree. All the thing is, when that board chairman sat down with us at the end of the year, I don't care if you're running out of anything else, that has nothing to do with it. At the end of the year, when he sat down with us, I brought up all these problems. His response was, wow. I mean, it was not, wow, thanks for telling me, I'll have to look into this, and thanks for making me aware that his response was, I get paid per diem, I don't get paid to do that.
To monitor day-to-day operations is what he said.
Well, not quite.
Yeah.
No, it was, my point was, do you do anything beyond sitting at the front office once a month and handling the meeting with that? Do you go back and talk to staff? Do you look into how they are operating? Do you have any interaction? And his response was, it's per diem, I don't get paid anything. And so then it makes me question now how much oversight they really have like that, of course, beyond what we do to people. That's one of them. So,
All right, I've made notes about doing a committee in the future, and that each of you, that when the new person is appointed, can go sit down and discuss some of the issues you may or may not have. And another date, maybe we do need to have a work session that explains the Board of Assessors more in detail. And as you mentioned, maybe we bring them together and have a joint session because they are not paid a lot of money, let's put it that way. And we do remember we appointed them ourselves. So, that said, so if it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and move on to the general admin risk management, which is the next page. Alicia, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. I made some changes.
Hey, let's just gonna say one thing. We've got a couple texts that can't hear Steve and Bernie very well. Y'all are kind of talking to the front when you talk to the microphone. Yeah. Yeah, I know, but Justin, you both have been kind of talking towards the front, and they just can't hear your two voices on them.
Okay. I have made some changes, just adjusting the amounts that are going into the line items, just to try to get us more in line with where our actuals are. And our liability, I adjusted it down by 110,000 and adjusted auto up by 125. We have had a fair amount of accidents and losses as far as vehicles are concerned, probably most frequently in the sheriff's department and the fire department. Few things in the fire department that seemed like minor damage ended up being $30,000 or $40,000 to repair these fire trucks. So what seems like just a little bump sometimes can get pretty expensive as far as that's concerned. So our auto insurance, we haven't received the quote back, but I'm anticipating, based on what they said last year with our losses and the fact that they didn't go up last year, they kind of indicated that this year, if we continue along the same trend, that we would see an increase. So in anticipation of that, that's why we had an increase in the auto above the difference between the two, which was the reclassification. Our contingency line item has gone down just from the standpoint that there were no extra dollars in the budget. There was nothing extra to put into that contingency line. So if we can find, if we make that adjustment to the tax commissioner's budget for the $14,000, then we can add that into that contingency line if we don't put it somewhere else. I would hope that we could increase the contingency line. One of my ideas about potentially increasing it would be that we have some equipment purchases in this budget for fire and some computer equipment. And I would hope that if we had some money at the end of the year, that we could maybe buy some of that equipment out of that and keep it out of this budget, which would give us some additional money to put into this contingency line. And what I'd like to do is follow up after we get all the way through the budget with the dollar amount so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about as far as putting money back into the contingency line, because I feel like we do need more money than this in the contingency. Can move over to Superior Court. All of these adjustments were made either to the two at the top were made to match what the payroll expense is, and then the other adjustments were made to match what the actual expenses for 2020, with very little impact to the total budget there. Clerk of the Superior Court, I made adjustments, increases to meet the actuals. There again, we've got a fairly large workers' comp claim in that area that we were increasing the budget for. The Board of Equalization, we felt like we needed to put a little bit more money there for some of those appeals. And then we had an increase in contractual services and office supplies. So, we came up with a total of $81,000 increase in that department, and a majority of that was related to workers' comp expense.
In 6,500 increase in the Board of Equalization for appeals would not have to be there if the tax assessor's office was doing the job of keeping appeals equivalent.
And hopefully we'll see that when we get some new direction over there.
We're gonna move, I got a couple of questions.
On the clerk report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know how I am about part-time employees. He's got 2 part-time employees in his office. They work 29 hours a week. And I asked him, and I'm not really sure. He said he thought that they did, last time we gave pay raises, they did not get a pay raise. Part-time employees. This is something that I want to make sure that we fix in the budget. So if we give a pay raise across the board, it is truly across the board. Because these people that come to work, he's got 2 of them. They come to work, they work 29 hours a week, and they're stuck at the same pay scale that he hires in. So I want to make sure from now on, if we have to put it in this budget, because I talked to the probate judge, she's got money in her budget so that she can move those salaries, or she can move that hourly wage for her part-time employees with the money that she's got in her budget. And Allen didn't seem to think that he had that there, that he could do it, or he's under the impression that he can't do it. I don't know. But I want to clarify that so that these part-time employees, when we give a raise, they get a raise too.
Well,
Are
here's
you
the
talking about a
concept
bonus, or are you talking about a raise? Because once you give a raise, it stays forever. Bonus is a one-time.
I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
I'm talking about a pay raise.
Okay.
So if we give a 2% or a 3% pay raise across the board to everybody in the county, it's part-time. I'm not talking about the guy handing out basketballs at the recreation department in the summer.
That's
I'm talking about
part-time.
people that come to work every day, or not every day, they come to work and they work 29 hours a week, and they've been doing it for a long, long time. We got a lot of people like that.
full-time, part-time versus part-time, part-time, or seasonal. And you talked about this before, I don't know if it's this exact point, but you were making some differentiation about if we hire somebody, like you said, to give out the basketballs at $7, they may not need, not saying we don't want to take care of everybody, but in other words, seasonal or something, I think we need to make sure, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but if we've got multiple classifications, full-time, full-time, part-time, 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 seasonal, part-time, if we've got all these categories, I want to make sure that we understand what we're saying here. It's kind of like the budget, right? It went up 4%, and it did, but in the same note, half of it is not the liability on Carroll County at the moment. So I'm just saying we need to be careful when we say across the board, what does that really entail?
Well, let me talk about how we classify part-time employees. We look at part-time employees that work hours, some hours every single week. We classify those as permanent part-time. Those people that work seasonal, maybe they were getting ready to gear up for the summer, we classify those people as temporary. Those are people that are not going to work some hours every single week. So we have temporary part-time, we have permanent part-time, and then we have full-time. So those are our 3 categories when we are looking at our hourly employees.
And the ones I'm talking about
Are classified as permanent part-time.
permanent part-time employees. We got several of them. Ben Skipper's got some, there's some in the clerk of court, there's some in the probate judge's office. So, I mean, they're scattered around in different
So we haven't been given those, Ann. If they were classified any type of part-time in their title, they do not get them across the board.
We have not, as far as the last two raises that we've given, but they are part of the bonus. When we give them the bonus, the $1,000, they were allocated not 1,000.
Okay.
But we did pay them a bonus. Now, remember, he could come back and give them a raise if he wanted to, if he's got money in that line item, because that's what other constitutional officers do. So if he wanted to give them more money, if he's got money there that he can do that, he could come and recommend or, ask for that to happen.
I'm not agreeing, disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just wanting to clarify.
Yeah, she's right. I mean, that's what Alan told. If he had the money there, he can, but he's got to make sure he's got the money. If he wasn't good sure it's kind of judge Annie on top first, so we got to take care of that.
Maybe it'd be best, Ann, if on Monday or Tuesday of next week or Wednesday even, if you could pull a list of all the permanent part-time people, you see what their dollar hour is and what departments they're in, so that everybody really be talking apples and apples. Because I think it would be very helpful if you saw what they actually made and maybe compared to other departments. That might be a better discussion.
I've been working on this a while. This came to my attention last November, and I started digging around then.
Well, she's happy to give it to you.
I've got a pretty good handle.
In this situation, neither one of these employees were here when we gave raises last year. One started in November and one started in January. So they didn't get the raise because they were hired after the raise.
Well, and he had it part-time, then he moved to full-time. So, and that's what they do.
That's what he's done, Steve, is
Yeah.
as full-time vacancies have become available, he's moved his part-time.
And that seems to be a trend, that seems to be, and these are some of these other departments, that's what they do. They're in it 29 hours, and then as soon as they get a full-time position, they bump them up into that full-time position. But then, I forget who it was, but they've got some part-time people that have been working there for years, I guess,
Well, why don't you have you and Ann work together on this and you figure out a dollar amount that we might put into next year's budget? We really need to see how much that's gonna cost.
We'll send you something.
But
I'll pull off the part-time people, what we call permanent part-time by department, and let you know the hourly rate.
so we know exactly the dollar. We're talking 5,000, we're talking 50,000. So I'm gonna put the two of you to work on that for us to come back so we have a dollar amount to know what we wanna work with.
Moving.
Okay, the next department is district attorney. I made a small $3 adjustment there just to get the numbers to line up to what we're actually being invoiced. He had requested an additional investigator for $75,000 and another $30,000 for what he called employee recruitment and retention. I would assume that's raises. And I did not increase the budget for his two requests.
And how much was that, the other one, the bonus part that you were?
There's $75,000 for an investigator and $30,000 for recruitment and retention.
We may have a little bit of breathing room now because of what's going on, and they may be slower coming back and not working as many cases. So this is probably maybe helping us a little bit this year. But I do think because the circuit did not split, and the district attorney was so passionate about this, and the sheriff and different ones seemed to buy into the idea of the circuit split as well. Now that we've gotten past that, I do think moving forward, and like I said, we may have bought ourselves a little bit of time if they're not slammed in the courts right now, but we may need to seriously look at this in the future, trying to work with the DA. What is that model going to look like if he's truly telling us he can't, he's got to have more staff? And I know other people tell us they need staff too, and we don't necessarily fund it, but I'm just saying that was one of the things last year, or the current fiscal year that we're in. We wanted to wait and see what that reporting was, and the recommendation was not to split. So moving forward, we may have to give a little more attention to this. So
Well, in light of that, we need to, because we try to keep the public defender equal with the district attorney, and the district attorney's got money the last time that it was given, and the public defender didn't. They got a little bit this year in some phone and office expense, but they didn't get any personnel and haven't got any personnel in some time.
Right.
So just be aware that if we give more money to the district attorney, I think we're going to have to give some consideration to the public defender to kind of keep the scales of justice close. Next is state court. The biggest addition there is the $25,000 for public defender that the city of Carrollton is reimbursing us for. We had added $25,000 of our own money last year, and have also added that city of Carrollton this year, which they've already started reimbursing us for in 2020. So, and we have an agreement in place with a new person for the state court to take 1/3 of the cases that come through state court. So hopefully, once court gets...
And mainly because, like I brought up at our retreat, I mean, I know this is not supposed to be,
Yeah,
got to
there's
figure
plenty of
out,
work to be done.
we've got to figure out how we maximize that revenue.
Yeah, there's plenty of demand.
Huh.
So in the solicitor's office, the city of Carrollton also, I did move some money out of the victim advocate program into salaries because it is being accounted for in the salary line. And so that's just an adjustment to try to get that into the correct line item. The rest of these are expenses that are helped to be offset by the money that the city of Carrollton gave us. And there were a couple of small adjustments for just trying to get us in line with the 2020 action.
Alicia, on that one, you have a line item for audit, but it looks like it's been featured. Does that department work?
The auditors audit it like they audit the rest of the internal departments. Now, the constitutional officers do pay for part of their audit.
That line item with numbers, this one has a 0 on it.
Yeah, it does not have its own separate.
Okay.
It's just audited as a part of the county.
Lisa, this line where it says public defender expense, I'm a little confused. So city of Carrollton reimbursement, that's money coming in to us, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Go to the magistrate court. Match what we're obligated. His salary is actually set by the state, and so we matched up there. Temporary labor, Judge Johnson wanted some extra money because he felt like court volume, once COVID-19 kind of broke away, he felt like his court volume was going to increase significantly, and he wanted the ability to hire a little bit of extra help to try to get him through that. The other line items where I gotta save some money there. And he is requesting a copier. There's several copiers within the county that have can no longer be serviced because parts are not available. The copiers are still working, but if they quit working, we can't repair them. And his is one of them, so he's requesting the copier. But that'll be another piece of equipment that I'll address after we're finished with this, and possibly talk about buying that out of this year's money if we have some available.
One question. This is a significant thing. Security screening, all that. I wonder, can we consider that or got any feedback from them about that? Because there's anything there, like the courthouse
He hasn't said anything to me about it. I don't know if he has some process. I know he's right there behind the sheriff's department, and I'm not saying that's an adequate security measure. The few times I've been over there, there's been a sheriff's deputy there.
Oh, they're always, sure, that we're there, but that's in the courtroom.
Yeah.
100 feet back in the room.
Right, so, I don't know.
I just don't want it to be an active way to have it. It just kind of concerns me a little bit. Here we have a courthouse called magistrate court that is, independent, and yet we don't have a bit of screen or anything there when people go in.
Alicia, one question I have, and you probably can answer this since you're in accounting, but I know a lot of places that have copiers, or especially where they run a high volume, a lot of them lease them, or, because it's kind of like a computer, it goes out every so often, technology, and you don't want to get caught with something like here and we're out of parts. Do you have any recommendation, here again, bigger picture, not necessarily just the magistrate court, but do you think that's a model we should try to consider in the future? Would that pay for itself, or do you like the idea of just buying them up front and hoping they last 10 years? Or
Well, we do it both ways. We've got some departments that lease them, and we got other departments that buy them outright. It may be the luck of the draw, because some equipment will last longer and some equipment doesn't last as long, and it may be the same. You may have the same model in your office that I have in my office, and mine may run 10 years and yours may only run 3. So I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it. I think Judge Johnson likes to know that he owns his copier. He may not. We are looking at some options. Janice is getting some quotes on both scenarios, purchasing and leasing, on this new stuff. So we can present it both ways and make a decision on what we feel like is the best way to move forward.
Did he ever figure out how to use his computer that he wanted?
He's zooming now.
Is he really?
He has not gotten his IT fees, no.
That's what I'm talking about.
He's wanting somebody to go before the state legislature.
That's what
and
I
take
told him
care of
last
that.
year, and then he said that he was going to do it. And I know they had a shortened session, but I didn't know if he'd ever taken that step or not.
I don't think so.
But he's zooming now, I believe.
I will reach out to Judge Johnson at the beginning of the week to see if he feels he'd like this screening system. Knowing him as well as I do, he would have asked for one if he wanted one. So, but I will follow up to let him know that that was a concern, and if we need to anticipate that as an expense either the end of this year or in a future SPOS. But I will reach out to Judge Johnson.
Next, we have juvenile court. I'm bringing,
The probate.
oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss one? Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't get to talk about probate. We'll go back and talk about probate. Okay, there is an increase in salaries for, she wanted to give $1 an hour raise for 2 clerks, and she actually moved some money out of temporary labor up to offset that cost. So I think that's probably what you were talking about, Steve, of how she opened up 3 or 4 part-time positions, too. And she had again requested pay for an Article I judge, which was $25,000 additional dollars for her. That is not included in this budget. We made some other minor changes to match 2020 actuals. She requested $3,000 in firearms software, which the sheriff had been paying for. She got the equipment from the sheriff, but there's a $3,000 a year maintenance agreement, and the sheriff didn't want to continue to pay it. so she's gotta pick that up. The next line item is the expenses for the SHAMSA grant, and, that's all for the mental health advocates. She asked for an increase in GCIC training, an increase in copier maintenance, and then she also asked for an increase, or a new copier, because her copier is in about the same condition as the magistrate court copiers. So there again, we may look at, if we want to purchase one, we may purchase it out of 2020 funds if those are available.
Well, I have a comment. And I don't know if we can fix it this year or not. We need to look into it. She is, it's an Article 6 judge.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said the
She's an
wrong.
Article 6 judge. She's not like Betty was. She's a lawyer. Certified in the whole 9 yards. And I dug around. I guess it's hard to say what her salary is.
Public record.
Okay,
Except
She's
I'm
current-
saying-
she's currently making, well, lost it. There it is. She's currently making $83,913 a year. I got a bunch of other salaries there, counties around the state, we're nowhere close. We're not even close. So that's something we need to look at.
I think we kind of looked at that last year. I mean,
We did.
because of the way the board was and everything, we didn't have a chairman. We kind of held what we had, and she was new stepping in that position.
Well,
So
I mean-
we kind of come back and look at that because she's
Newton
already.
County and Rockdale County pay more than we do.
Right,
Come on,
right.
Newton and Rockdale.
Do you know,
Well-
are they new judges, or they've been there for a long time? Because if you've been there a long
You've,
time, you get longevity built on it.
I think
You
that's
signed
another,
up, you know, you sign up to run for the job, you know what the salary is before you run for it. And just like you as a commissioner, you knew what it paid before you ran. So, you know,
Steve, what I'd like to suggest is that you sit down with Susan in the next week or so, because there's a lot behind all of that. It was recently explained to me, but like Al Johnson makes exactly 83,000 also, the magistrate court judge. Okay, so if you give one judge a raise, you've got to give another one a raise. I mean, so there's a whole lot more of this picture. And then there again, the salaries may not match when you do our open records request, because there's longevity built in, there's the COLA raises, so it really, yeah, I definitely agree with you on the statement, but I think it's not just this department, it would fall on several, across, you have to look at all the judges together. And I think, Susan, I'm volunteering you because you know so much about this, and as a whole form you fill out that gets you to where the end result is, and that way you'll be comparing exactly what you need to be comparing. But this is definitely something that I know y'all did address last year. If we put it in this budget, we gotta pull 25,000 from somewhere else. You've gotta remember that. But I would like to, let's have more information. Some of these things, we do kick the can down the road, but I think we need to look at it as a bigger picture, because all the judges start off at a certain thing, and then you can't, you gotta go back to their base salaries, I think. And I think when you sit down with Susan, or anyone that would like to see that, it's very interesting process how it works out. I think that's very helpful.
Does that base salary include her being an Article
What I'm
6?
saying is, if you got an Article 6 judge, you need to change the base salary.
We do, we're very lucky we have a,
The state sets that number.
but
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, because we didn't have that, so now we have it.
a law
Is there a way-
change. The probate judge could be, anyone, years past, anyone could run for probate judge. Now, anytime a new probate judge comes in or runs, they have to be an attorney. So that was a state law that was changed. However, they didn't change the paperwork that went with it.
Or the pay scale.
Or the pay scale, yes. So these are all very good conversations, and I'm writing these down so that this time next year, I hope when we could do the budget process the way I originally had intended to do it, these things get put in before we get to this point, but there's a whole lot more that goes with that. And there again, I would be, I'm with you on this. We're very lucky to have, very, very lucky to have her as our probate judge, because I'm a little bit biased. She's very, very intelligent, so we're very, like many county employees, we're very lucky for what we have and the pay we pay, so. But, yes, this could be added back in if we take it from somewhere else. But you've got to remember there's another judge that goes with this one to keep the pay scale equal.
And who's the opposite judge?
Well, magistrate court, and I may be speaking a little bit because I don't have all those forms in front of me, but you got to remember he has.
He's got the COLAs and the longevity in his position. If you go to his base pay, the base pay for him and the base pay for the probate judge is the same.
So if Al retired and another judge came in, they'd be making that same 83. Is that quite right too? So this is where I'm going with it, is that the only reason he's making more than her is that he's had longevity in the COLA raises, but to be on the base salary, it's got to be the same.
It's been with the county since 1999.
Yeah.
I think it's a conversation that bears more investigation. Well, and I say, grouping together, but to your point, Michelle, is that there's a lot of things that piggyback off of one another.
Yeah,
And the other
great
thing
word.
is, Steve, I wouldn't disagree about that, but in the same note, we have disparaging payments all over Carroll County. And how do we also tell somebody that's worked somewhere for 30 years in Alan Lee's office that's making, hardly anything either? So I do think she's worth more money, but I don't know it's as matter as us just saying, we'll just give it, because then you have everyone else looking at the situation too.
I
So
wasn't saying let's give her $25,000 pay raise.
I understand.
I'm saying we need to make some adjustments here on base salaries for somebody with that experience and that education.
So I'll put you with Susan again, like how you work with Ann on the part-time, I'll put you with Susan, because these would be good recommendations going into the budget for next year of what dollar amount we're really truly looking at.
We'll keep dragging it in the courthouse, you're going to have to give me a pay.
And I think this something bears having conversations with the state. I mean, if the state changed the minimum requirements, but did not include any pay, or did not send a letter and stated, you better be doing whatever. I'm just saying there's a lot of things, it's not everything is our responsibility. And I think the state bears some discussion in this too.
But we are very, very lucky.
Now can we move to juvenile court?
Yes, you've been trying to do that one.
Thank you. In the salary line item, we had some money down in juvenile wellness court that was actually salary, so we moved that up to get that in line with the payroll records. The next biggest change was he requested last year $27,000 for indigent representation, and we didn't include that in the funding. Again, this year, he requested money for indigent representation. And what happens, the way he explained it to me, was you get children coming into court and they don't have a parent that's taking care of them. And then the grandparent gets pushed into having to be responsible for these children. And the grandparent doesn't have the ability to pay for an attorney, and the child doesn't have the ability to pay for an attorney. So he's seeing more and more cases where you got people within the system that can't pay for legal services. So we agreed to put that into the budget for this year. So that's probably the largest part of that increase. Public defender, she requested an additional $122,000 attorney and a 4% increase for her staff, and that was not funded in the budget. We had already approved through a budget amendment an increase in telephone, contractual services, and office supply expense, and so I added that to this budget.
Alicia, the 66,000, does that include utilities?
Didn't I?
I mean, I don't see a separate.
I think that it does, but I'm not 100% sure about.
I think this is a conversation that, as we move forward, I know we were looking into getting deeper into looking at the county admin building, Michelle, and then COVID hit us. I don't know where you're at with that, but to me, I see an empty floor at the courthouse. I see the possibility of us having a county admin building somewhere down the road, and I've heard a lot of the backstory of, well, we need to, you know, if we have to have more judges, they need to have room and places to go. I understand a lot of the dynamics, but as a county, if we're renting and we have empty floor space, do we talk about empty floor space for 12 years? That something might happen, and in the meantime, we've been paying $66,000 a year for 12 years. And I'm just making that an out loud analogy, but I think we need to heavily look at that. The other thing is I went over to that house, and I'm not saying that anybody bears any responsibility. I'm just saying when you walk in, the carpet was so old and wrinkled as I walked around. I mean, I was tripping and falling, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic. I mean, it was, I couldn't believe two people crammed into one office that I didn't even think was a big enough cubicle for one person. I was appalled when I walked in there. I don't mean appalled at the owner of the house. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that those people are working in that condition. And I'm not saying that we can translate anything into the money immediately this year. I'm just saying bigger picture, we need to figure something else out. I don't think we need to be in the business of renting things when we have open floor space. And I know there's a lot of moving parts right now and the unknowns with the economy. And I think those people need a more decent place to work. Whether it's a remodel inside, I think one of the main things is they just don't have enough room in there. But I was shocked when I went and looked, and I was not proud that we have people working, you know, in connection with Carroll County in those conditions. Like I said, it's nothing against the owner of the building. It's just there's too many people crammed in there. It wasn't right. So I'd like to see us seriously address this in the future and figure out what that looks like.
So can I put you in charge of chairing an ad hoc committee
Sure.
that goes through and looks, I've got I'm not sure this is the most recent. I think Stacy, you and I were looking at the new agreement, which carpet and stuff has to be paid for by the county, and you see we don't have that in a line item. So,
Well, and to his, I think we all had an opportunity to kind of step in and probably had the exact same response when we walked in the building, like, whoa, this is not an equal workspace with other places.
I'm not kind of say our place around.
so do the three of you, can I do three? Can I do three? Because it's not. So I could put the three of you to do an ad hoc committee to work with the public defender to figure out what her needs are. Because there again, we could be sitting here again this time next year and we have no numbers right this moment. We don't know square footage, we don't know cost to put new carpet in. We need to have some very tangible numbers so that this time next year when we're talking about the budget, we know what we want to put in or not put in or where we want to go.
Okay, we're renting a building and they want us to put the carpet in.
That's pretty
Yeah,
common.
see, that's a problem. We got buildings in the county that we own.
Right.
That people not paying rent for. Okay, so,
Well,
yeah, why are we renting the building or even fixing it up?
well, y'all, I will put the three of you on a committee that before this time next year, you come back with a recommendation on what we need to do.
Well, yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying. It ties into the county admin building. It ties into looking at the long-range plan of the courthouse. I got some of the back story about the security issues of them seeing people after hours. So I'm not saying that's exactly where they need to go. I'm just saying at some point we can't always say, well, that's reserved for whatever, or we can't use that for whatever, and then we find ourselves 12 years down the road and all those places are still open. I just want us to be a little more frugal with how we're thinking about planning when we're paying $66,000 in rent or that in utilities when we could be using something of our own possibly. Not to even add on top of that, the conditions are horrible.
So I'll put the three of you to work with Mary Ellen or whoever she wants to put from her office to come back next year with some recommendations, and whether we fund them or not is a different story, but at least we will have tangible dollars to know if we want to go forward, which way we want to go forward. Right now, we don't have anything like that, so.
Along with that, I mean, you gotta immediately consider that a new admin building, do we add 11,000 square feet or whatever?
We need to know.
So,
If we had a new admin building, they could go in the courthouse where the commission office is.
right,
It's already remodeled, it's right there at the courthouse.
yeah, so I just,
If we had the admin building.
if we did,
We'll put them, I mean, on the committee, and then y'all come back and let us know. I mean, let us know our options. But right now, we can sit here and talk for another 3 hours, but we don't really have tangible how much square footage do they need, what kind of offices do they need, what's their future growth going to be, especially if
Security.
she wants to add this, this additional attorney that requires another desk, another space. So I'd rather, I don't mind if y'all want to continue this conversation, but I think it's best if the three of them, and Ernie, if you want to be added, okay, you're fine, okay. So Steve Montrell and Clint will work with Mary Ellen or someone that she appoints from her office to at least come back with some options for us.
Yes,
So we know
ma'am.
how to work with the budget.
Michelle, while we're on, they did a copy.
Yeah, yes, that's, she has it on here, and that was one of those things too that is on this list for a June budget amendment. If, we hope we have some funds left over, but that would be, at least you would remove this out of this line item.
They got the same copier that we used to go over at the high school in 2002. Didn't get marks for it.
Yeah.
It's $4,000.
That's
That's
a-
what it would do.
Yeah, we have Judge Johnson's, we have the public offender, and we have the probate judge. All of them are in the same boat with their copiers.
Yeah, and that is not in that is not in this budget. I mean,
I'm sorry, I thought there was,
I need to add that
okay,
up.
well, I think I knew we had the conversation, so I knew it was one of our, I think we had the conversation, we would like to purchase that copier in June, because about the time she realized hers is really one of those you have to kick and bang, it started the COVID-19.
Alicia, all I would ask, if you don't mind, is if y'all are looking at multiple things, look at it from a bigger perspective. If you lease 3 of them, instead of individually, one for magistrate, one for public defenders, is there a discount? I mean, let's make sure as we're doing things, we try to look at things holistically if we can. Or if they said, hey, the magic number is, if you'll lease 7 a year from us, we'll cut the rate in half. Well, then you may all of a sudden can figure out in other departments where that needs to take place.
And that's what schools do. And if they can pass old ones off to other persons that's not, that'll just quickly gone, you know what I mean? And get a better rate of doing that.
And Janice Duff does a lot for us in the purchasing. She does a lot of that checking, so.
Yeah, and she's working on getting quotes, so I'll try to make sure that she understands that we need to.
Put several quotes together. Okay.
Okay. That moves us to the sheriff's department. And this is a situation where we kind of kicked the can a little bit. The sheriff came to the board and asked for a 4-year plan. And the first year of that plan was funded. The second year was not funded. Then the third year was funded. And the fourth year would be this year, which would finalize that plan. If that plan was fully funded, his salary line would be $9,120,000. as you can see, his salary line is $7,874,000. We have, in addition to not giving raises 2 years, we have 8 positions that remain unfunded. So if we funded those positions and gave the raises that we had agreed to and gave those people the benefits, we would need an additional $1,246,000 in personnel costs for the sheriff's department. Now, we looked earlier at the per capita cost for sheriff, and we saw that Carroll County is the lowest of all the sheriff's department in what we spend per capita. So I think that goes to show you that our sheriff's department is not where it needs to be. He also asked for medical services to be increased by 2%, and that is the medical services for the jail for when the inmates come in and are most of the time when somebody's processed into the jail, they have some type of medical issue, and that has to be addressed in the jail system. So they're spending, right now almost $1.2 million in medical services each year for the people coming into the jail system. They also asked for an additional $12,000 for cell phone service that had been paid out of the seized drug fund. And what has happened with the seized drug fund, we used to get a lot of money on I-20 for making stops up there. Since the construction's begun, it's no longer safe to make those stops. And so therefore we have lost a lot of seizure money because we can no longer make the stops on I-20. And they are asking us to transition the expense of those cell phones into the general fund over the next few years. I did not get the total amount to transition. They did ask for $12,000 this year, but I don't know what that total will be over the period of time.
$48,000.
$48,000, okay, thank you.
When did the 4-year plan start? Is that 4 years?
In 17, it was funded in 17, it wasn't funded in 18, it was funded again in 19, and now in 20. Unless we change something to increase the revenue.
And to clarify, when we state it wasn't funded, technically the officers got the raises, but he was able to obtain that money from positions that were not filled, correct?
Not in 18, and there was no raise in 18.
There was
I don't
nothing.
believe.
There were raises.
There was raises in 18.
I think that's how they got the money,
Yeah.
and that's why this bigger number you have has got to be fed back into, because if you do 5%, you're looking at $393,700 that's actually the portion of the 4th year plan. And then I think that other number is basically trying to add back in what has almost been robbed from Peter to pay Paul, if they ever could find those officers or decide to fill them in the future by the positions that are already approved. That money would have to be replenished to actually pay for the positions that are already approved.
Well, last year I tried to fund all of those positions, and there was not enough additional revenue in the budget to fund those positions. So there were originally 12 positions that were unfunded, and last year we did fund 4 of them. But this year there's not enough money to give raises or to fund any of them. I was hopeful that we could at least fund a couple more or half of the positions, even if we didn't give raises, but I couldn't even make that work with the amount of revenue that we're looking at.
So, when did they get raised?
17, 18, and 19. I didn't think they did in 18. But
They did.
say they
They got
did.
raises.
So,
This is only year. This is the last year of the
Okay.
contract.
So 20 they did, and then in 21, from the code, we're not.
That's correct. That's right.
No, they got the money. So what happened was they funded it 1 year, just like the commissioners. They stroked a check, the Board of Commissioners, to fund it. Then when the second year plan rolled around, all of a sudden the commission during that time didn't have enough money in the checking account to stroke a check. So within his own budget, there were maybe, I'm just making this number up, 10 officers that he had in his total number to hire, but they physically didn't have them hired. So they took that money to ultimately be able to fund the second year. Okay, so that's kind of been a systematic issue. So the people have received their money the first 3 years, but now we would have to go back and replenish that. If somebody shows up, puts in an application and wants to be hired and he has those positions, then we have to come back and fund them. So you've got two mechanisms going on here at once. You've got one about the actuality, do we fund the fourth year? And the second issue you've got is you've got to go back and replenish those old positions at some point down the road if he truly gets to a point that he has to hire them, because those positions have already been approved by us, but they've been defunded. Does that make sense?
So how many people is short?
8, that's correct.
I wish I was wrong. I mean, I can't do it, obviously we can't do anything about it, but I looked at the starting pay of deputies in surrounding counties and in some of the municipalities, the guys were way off. Way off.
We've been way off for years.
My concern with not funding the 4-year plan, we can get in a discussion all day long about there's not enough money, they're not being paid at the rate that they need to be. We can get into discussion, the same thing is happening in another department or whatever. My concern is yes, you have to have the money to do it, but I don't think we need to be renegotiating the terms of what was agreed upon 4 years ago. It's just like the county admin building. You know, it was in there, purchase land, build a new building. That's not up for us to go back and secretly say that secretly means sell land and demolish a building. That's not what was voted on. So it's the same situation here. Yes, you have to find the money, but it's not even a matter of are they getting paid enough or are they not. It's about there was an agreement for this board prior to me being here to fund 4 years, and that board agreed to that. And so that's my issue, is they could be getting all kind of money or they could be getting no kind of money. Our obligation is that we agreed, meaning this body, whether it's individually us or a prior board, agreed to pay a 4-year plan. And that's where I think our dilemma comes, is not should we fund it or not fund it based off do we think the officers are getting enough money or not. Our obligation is to try to find the money to fulfill an essential contract, whether it was a gentleman's handshake or whether we have a sheet of paper.
This is an agreement that was voted on, I mean, and I
So
understand.
that's where I'm at on it, that I have a hard time. It's not about giving these employees preferential treatment or, hey, we're going to give these people money and we're not going to give the other people money. It's about this is what happens, and there's nothing wrong with it, but when you put an obligation out there and you agree to it and it's multi-year, it doesn't go away.
Right.
You still have to deal with it. So
It's just like a maintenance contract. I mean, if we agree to sign it and put our seal to it, it's in stone. We got to do it. I mean, somehow we've got to do it.
So currently you didn't fund it,
No,
That's correct.
not fun.
I
It's
did not.
1.2 million.
1.2.
Well,
that's to completely replenish. The real amount to fill the 4-year plan is $393,700 would fulfill, it's my understanding, would fulfill essentially the 4th-year contract.
The 5% raise total. What would that be?
$393,700.
well, according to Brad had told me that to get to where they said they were going to be, that they need to be at 6%. And that'd be 472, 440. Now, I don't have the details of,
So we don't have the contract, or we don't have the agreement of the,
no, I didn't go back and pull where it was agreed to at the board meeting.
We agreed on a 5% across the years, is what we agreed on. George remembers, he voted on it too.
Why don't we get that accurate number? So basically, talking about looking at the fourth year, funded the fourth year. So can we get that number?
So we're talking about somewhere between four, so what you're saying is not fund all the positions that we agreed to
Correct.
fund. You're
Just do
saying
what-
just
Fund
fund
the fourth year.
the fourth year.
And then we're done
With
with
what
that
we have.
contract.
and then we're done with that until the point arises, if there's a mass number of people wanting to go work at the sheriff's office, that's commitment still there that would need to be refunded.
Yeah,
To
buys
make
us
the
some
positions
time.
good, but right now, just to fill the 4-year plan, and I did speak with the sheriff and the chief deputy, met with them prior to this, just about going through their budget and talking things, and I'm not trying to speak for them, but I think that was a general consensus that they understand that maybe the whole thing would not be funded at this point as far as replenishing the deputies or the positions that we took money from, but to not do the 4-year agreement is, I mean, we have that option, but I'm just saying that's another ball of wax.
Yeah.
And I can get the exact dollar amount. I think between what you've said and what I came up with, it's gonna be somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 approximately. And I do think that we do need the exact dollar amount. I'm not trying to, I just don't have the information with me to tell you what that is, but to get it, give you a ballpark number so you can kind of get it in your mind of what we're talking about. I think it's somewhere between 400 or 390 and 475.
And I'm not suggesting there was anything done incorrectly originally when this was done, so I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm fixing to say. But, and I understand you can't always do everything in 1 year, but this is the issue moving forward. Yes, we need to prioritize public safety, or I'm someone that believes that. But the reality is, this is what happens when you do a 4-year plan here, and maybe you didn't take a 4-year plan from another department head. I'm not saying it's not wrong, but at some point, nothing can ever be fair moving down the road if everybody's not taken into consideration at each point down the road. And I'm not saying this was done incorrectly, I'm not suggesting that. But I don't think you can sit and say, well, I'm not gonna fulfill a contract we agreed to because I don't think it's fair to somebody else. I mean, at some point you have to get on a level playing field with your obligations, and then moving forward, try to make things as fair as you can.
Well, I think where that came in is the sheriff's the only one that put a program together and came to us and asked for a program to try to get his people up to where they need to be. No one else brought anything.
Say it again.
The sheriff's the only one that put a program together and brought it to the board about a 4-year program. No one else brought it. None of the department heads even brought another program.
Then board.
Yeah.
And said, look, this is where I need to get my people because of backdoor losses, because people don't even apply because we pay so low. They go to
Douglas County.
They go to Douglas County, they go to
Harrison
Powell,
County.
whatever. And because their starting pay is more than what I could even offer. Here's a 4-year plan. This will help me.
Right.
You can start budgeting for it. This will help me get to where I need to be. So he brought that to us in a work session, as I recollect. And said, you know, this is, I'm trying to, play fair with y'all. Instead of asking for this in one whop, let's do this incrementally, and this will help me get to where I need to be for my people and still be attractive.
Right.
We're working
that-
towards
Which I
that.
think-
I would agree with that.
Y'all
That's true.
recollected that?
And I think Tim is actually gonna be coming with a program like that for
He
the
already
fire
has.
department. Yeah.
I asked the chief of fire, if y'all remember when he came back in
Yeah.
the work session,
I'm about to say, that was with the grant.
the grant money and what he needs to get to be where he needs to be. So we've got
Well,
two
and
departments.
he also wants to increase his too. I mean, we gave $1 an hour last year. He was asking for another $1 an hour this year. which,
But this is fundamentally what I talked about when I first came on the board. We have tunnel vision, and somebody elbows their way up to the front and lays it out, and there's money there to do it. Do you want to do it, yes or no? And you agree to it, and the money goes away. And everybody else starts asking something, and you're like, well, whoa, wait a minute. That's why I think at the beginning of every year, and Alicia, this is no offense to you, you've done a great job with the budget, but we need something laid out. This person wants this person wants this person wants this. And so it helps you moving forward to take other people into consideration. Maybe you can or maybe you can't, but at least you know the other stuff that's on the table. We start talking about, well, don't you remember so-and-so wanted money? Well, don't you remember 2 years ago so-and-so wanted money? At some point, I can't remember everything. I need it on a sheet of paper. So as we move forward, everything's laid out, and we know what the fire chief is wanting for the next 5 years. We know what Ben Skipper's wanting for the next 5 years. We know what the sheriff wants for the next 5 years. At some point, to try to make things as fair as we can, we've got to take everything into consideration at the moment. It doesn't mean we can fund everything. It doesn't mean everybody gets what they want, but it doesn't look like we have only chosen the sheriff's department to cherry pick and we'll take care of them or no one else. It means we consider everybody fairly in the moment and we prioritize. But we can always go back to that original master sheet and know what everybody is wanting or proposing for us to consider. And it's constantly before us every time we vote on something. So it reminds us of what everybody's wanting. So we can stay focused, to Ernie's point, the bigger picture, and not get so in the moment of can we afford this one item or not, but we don't know what the ramifications is of everybody else wanting something because we're not looking at it at the same time.
Alicia, you said earlier, you told Ernie that we have 10 million in the general fund this year,
well, we're running for
but
for
you're
this
gonna
year.
spend about 5 million in the
Yeah.
next few months.
I think that we will end up with about $5 million to go to other things.
Can we not use part of that for funding this last year of program for the sheriff? The 400 or 450 or 500, whatever it is, and get this completed for what we agreed upon?
So the answer to the question is yes.
Okay.
The way it's going to look is going to be a little odd because you're going to cut your year off at June 30th, and that money's going to go into fund balance when it cuts off at June 30th. So in essence, you would be using that money out of fund balance. So you would put it in your savings account at June 30th, and then you would take it back out of your savings account throughout the year, using it up.
But we still have money going into the reserves. Even if that came out, there's still money being put into the reserves.
Yes, if we agreed to do it.
Isn't that what a savings account's for? If you get a bump in the road?
That's what I think.
Me too.
Some people are not willing to pull out of that.
Right, I understand.
But I feel like if there's a way that we can, if the projection comes
Follow
true,
you. Yep.
and we have that, I think that may be an option.
I think it's the only option.
But it adds to the budget for next year, July 1st. I mean, it becomes a
it
continuous
continues to
expense.
add.
Right.
So we
That's
could
correct.
make it have extra money from this year, but knowing that we.
Right. Well, this is the last year we agreed upon for the sheriff.
Yes, but it moves his budget up, so it doesn't come back down. If we give him the 500,000, then next year we still owe the 500. I mean, the budget increases. It's not a one-time gift.
And I understand that and I agree with that, but that's also what boards have to do. Just like if I agree to something and I'm in my last year here and I'm gonna leave, I have to think about what I'm voting for the next person that's gonna come in. Just because you're new on the board doesn't mean obligations.
Right, if we give it out of this year, we also know that we have to be obligated to it to next year too. I mean,
For the same people.
Additional, it's whatever that final number is, that
Yes,
final
we have
number
that.
always has to be kept up.
But we do know other people's coming, so the money would be there for
But
that.
next year, it's got to come from somewhere.
We know the fire's coming.
They're not getting
I know we
one
get
time
increases
raise.
by $500,000 or
A raise.
whatever.
No.
I really don't, but if we can do it, I think we need to live up to our obligation.
Take into consideration is if, and I'm only speaking of the 400,000 right now, the
Right.
5%, and you're gonna check on that number. I'm not even talking about the 1.2 that ultimately may need to be filled, or maybe they never get enough people to fill them, but right now they have the positions approved. Think that if we try to tackle this now, as bad as it is, when we have to deal with trying to look at things holistically down the road again, that's at least 400,000 off the table down the road too, right? That amount compounded. That number becomes even a larger number to try to deal with down the road when you consider other departments.
I'd much rather fund the obligation we have in the sheriff's office and give more money to supervisors in the tax assessment office. Or basically they're increasing, rolling into this, why not? The other thing is, I'd like a bigger picture of what, do we have a similar obligation, so we got the sheriff, and now the fire department has a 5-year plan. That study was done several years ago, again, before, I could have had a problem before, but, the fire department's 5-year, I know we did.
When we graduate into the fire department running, what we do.
Right, but I mean, talk about the sheriff, now what about the fire department, so what is our goal?
Well, the last thing that I was trying to fund the actual positions of the 2 fire stations that are unmanned. When it was presented that they would like another $1 an hour, I don't think that was necessarily a commitment that we agreed upon and made. It's just, I'm sure we would consider it. So I'm only aware of, in that department's obligation, is that we tried to say we were going to fund the new positions. And here's the other thing. If you have to look at your previous commitments, the sheriff's was 4 years ago. The other one we just made 3 months ago. Now, I'm not saying I don't want to do for the fire department too, but I'm just saying this is a part of prioritization. This is a part of tough decisions.
Well, no, there's something in the back of my mind, that there was a study done, when I was campaigning last year.
Yes, sir.
Tim explained to me something about I forget the name of the study, there was a study done.
Oh, the Hayes stuff?
And that goes back quite a while.
Yeah, it does. Well,
But that was a lot of people, right? I mean, that was for the whole
I
county.
think that was the county employees across the board.
Right.
now that was fire department stuff.
Okay.
I think Susan.
But it never was funded.
Well, his recent one was to be able to bring the 2 employees. And that's what we looked at recently.
So why don't we, again, we can keep discussing, but why don't we move on and we will get the actual,
Numbers,
go back to 2017, go back to our
right.
paperwork that's online and pull that, and let's get what we really need to be talking about, so.
I think that we see that there's definitely support to move forward with it, so I think we need to figure out how to do it.
How to
And then
do it,
we'll
yeah.
come back to you and say, these are the options as far as,
I don't think if we do it, it's just how we're gonna do it.
yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get the dollar amount, so we'll get all that back to you.
And then the sheriff did ask for $50,000 additional in overtime, which is related to an increase in investigations. You know, if we funded some of those other positions, that may change that a little bit, but for now, I think that's what he's.
Well, and one positive we can look at in the sheriff's is, you know, they've not been running full expenses because they haven't been running full steam ahead. So there may be some help in the end of this year with that as well.
Well, and the sheriff is really very easy to work with. I mean, he understands, he knows budgets, he will work with us, he knows we're trying, so we do what we can do. Like the tax assessor.
The CI had an unfunded major position, and they requested that we changed that position to captain and funded, and so that's the difference in their salaries. They asked for some radio repair and maintenance, which we see, replacement radios, which we see here, and we see that in the fire department. And then they asked for more vehicle maintenance because they're starting to put some miles on their vehicle, and maintenance is starting to move up on those. They've asked for an increase in travel for mandated training. They've asked for an increase in gas and oil, for increased usage, and then they've asked for an additional $35,000 in food costs, and when that's broken down, he's only asking for 4 cents a meal increase. That just kind of blew me away, that 4 cents a meal for 7 days a week, 365 days a year equates to $35,000.
It's expensive to have a big family, Alicia.
Yeah, it is. And then he's requested some additional money for release allowance, where they have to buy the clothes and have them ready to go once they walk out. He's also requested an additional $3,000 in kitchen equipment, which I think their stuff's pretty worn. And then another $3,500 in additional computer money because he's got some stuff that needs to be replaced over there. Now, the last two items we could potentially take out of some 2020 money if it's available.
Okay, can I get some insight into and Michelle, you answered this through email, and I appreciate that as well, but I guess making the major into a captain, is this, I guess I'm trying to figure out the increase in here. Is this person, he needs another staff member, and he just happens to want to upgrade them as well while he's hiring them? I guess I'm trying to figure out just how desperate that person's needed. I'm not saying they're not needed or it wouldn't be in there, but I'm trying to figure out, is he understaffed and he needs to go ahead and do this, or what is the issue with?
I think he has an adequate amount of majors at this point in time, and he really needs somebody at a little bit higher level. He's had a couple of people, I believe, at the top, Forbes and that have left with many years of experience, and he doesn't really have anybody who can move into that position at this point. So he really needs to fund that position with a captain. And there again, you know, I think we run the CI just kind of bare bones, and it's been run that way for quite a while. And I think he's trying to get his staff up to where he's got some adequate positions where somebody calls him sick, he's not scrambling to try to find who can work overtime, or, you know, he's got enough to cover what he does. Now, he can probably better answer that question than I can.
Can I chime in a little bit on that? Can I chime
Yeah,
in?
sure, if you know the answer.
Yeah, I know a little bit. Originally, under the previous warden, we had 2 captains, and he promoted one of them to a major. That major has since resigned from the county, and so he promoted another person to the open captain. So what he's wanting to do, the major position was in the budget, but he just wants to move. He says he doesn't need a major position, he needs another captain. So the job title major was in there, and from my understanding, he wants to change that back to the captain and have 3 captains.
But it wasn't funded in the budget.
Huh?
The head count was there.
The head count's
But
there,
the funding wasn't
Yeah,
there.
when we had-
And so he's asking to get the money put back into the budget
Yeah,
fund.
he wants to put the money back in there so that he can put the position, put the dollars with the budgeted cash.
I guess all I'm saying, if the chairman and you feel strongly enough to leave the 44,000 in there, I can live with it, but I'm just sitting and saying, if we've got a consensus on a prior obligation with the sheriff's office for 400,000, that's 10% of it. And I'm not trying to take away from somebody else, but I'm just saying this is part of the tough decisions we've got to make. If we want to deal with a 4-year obligation, if you and the chairman really feel that we need to leave that in there, I'm fine with that. But I'm saying that's also an option of $44,000 to go toward what we just said we have a consensus to deal with at the sheriff's department. So I don't know.
I think that's something we need to find out.
And then Ernie's.
Okay, we ready to move to the fire department? And we've increased salaries here to man station 17 and 18 for 1/2 of the year. So those firefighters will be hired in January and go from here forward. The fire chief also asked for a $1 an hour increase for all firefighters, which leaves about $500,000 in salaries that's unfunded and $50,000 in overtime that's unfunded. Now, we did fund a $50,000 increase in overtime, which would be part of the station 17 and 18, plus give a little bit of extra money to cover some light duty, some people he has on light duty and military leave. The thing that I see within the fire department is that we have the bare minimum amount of firefighters. So we've got 2 firefighters on the truck, and if one firefighter calls in sick or can't come to work for some reason, then we either have to call in a temp or a part-time person, or we have to get somebody to work a double shift, and if that's not available, then we can't run that truck for the day. So we don't have like a floater to float between our stations in a situation where somebody calls in sick, or even for vacation for that matter. Now, vacation's a little easier to plan for, but it goes back to just not having the funding that we need to give the fire department all the tools that they need to adequately run the fire department. And I think that when somebody calls in and can't come to work, it puts them in a real bind. And that isn't addressed in this budget at all. It's not addressed in the request from the fire chief, and it's not unfunded or funded or anything. But that's just my personal comments and things that I've observed with the fire department.
One of my concerns about not moving forward with this, and it's a big decision because it was the latest decision that we've made in something bigger, assuming that we're going to get the SAFER grant. And I'm not just saying this because Fairfield is in my district, but you take Jones Mill Road Station that I think it's 18 that's not manned, and that's physically in Ernie's station. And while I think everybody's home is important, and I don't want someone to misconstrue what I'm saying, Fairfield is so packed. It has so many houses. There's so many winding roads. Their fire department that they have is basically at the front gate. The good thing about Station 18 is it's positioned to quickly not only service the area of Ernie's district there, but it can quickly get into the backside of Fairfield. But you take the narrower roads, the winding roads, the volume of homes, I think, moving forward, that's very critical that station get manned just from that perspective. I mean, because there's so many, the volume of homes to try to service, and where the fire truck's now having to come from, that could, significantly impact our ability to get to those homes on the backside if that station is not manned. So, here again, I'm not saying that just because it's in my district, but I think that's a real operational challenge that we're trying to overcome by manning that station.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, we've got the resources, we've got a nice station, we've got the equipment sitting out there, and we do have somebody at that station, but there again, one person isn't adequate manning of a facility like that. So, but you're right. You got to make some hard decisions. You got to decide whether it's worth trying to find the revenues to fix, or whether you want to take the expenses from another department and put them here, or if you want to take other expenses within the fire department and move them to that line. You're absolutely right. There's some very difficult decisions to make.
Well, you have this in the budget, don't you? You have all his requests in the budget.
I have the SAFER grant in the budget, but I do not have the $1 an hour increase in the budget.
Tim, you seem to feel like now is a good time to be applying for the safety grant, that it's, has a good likelihood of being approved. So I think while that money is there, it's certainly good to go for it. So I'm for funding this if we can get the safer grant and move forward with managing 17, 18.
Well, this is another situation that the board makes an obligation for a long-term commitment, because once that SAFER grant runs out, then the county has to provide the revenue to offset those expenses.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I like utilizing the SAFER grant, and I think it's really good that we can get money to help us with this moving forward. But 3 years from now, whoever's on this board, it may be some of you, it may be all of you, but it may be none of you. But whoever it is will be left with the obligation of finding the revenue to fund these firefighters. And
The other thing that we have to think about, in my opinion, and we all have different opinions on the role of government, and I do believe as much as the next, you have to balance things with recreation and things that make a place livable, right? But the reality is, when it comes down to it, government's real role is things like roads, things you can't do on your own. Public safety with the sheriff, the fire department, and I'm not trying to single out the recreation department. I don't want anyone listening to the video to think I don't support that, but I'm just saying, when you come down to things like that, people's children can technically play ball at home, but you can't necessarily afford to buy the equipment to save your home from a house fire.
that's right.
And so we really have to also look, while we're trying to think through strategically and conservatively, we've got to keep in mind, what do we believe collectively is the true role of government while we're making these decisions, and public safety is definitely a prioritization.
Yeah, public safety is the core priority of government. A private company really isn't going to want to do that. They don't get paid to do that. So, yeah.
Lisa, let me make sure that I'm understanding this. This $8,704,000 change, 8.7 million. That covers everything that the fire chief has asked for, except for the $1 an hour pay rate. Is that true?
No, that is not.
Okay.
There has been some other items that he requested more funding for that I did not fund, and he and I discussed it, so he's aware that it's not in there. But
Okay, but does it outfit, does it give us the additional, 13 firefighters?
yes,
Okay, it
yes,
gives us the additional 13
Yes.
firefighters, and does it give them the turnout gear that they
Yes. And it also replaces some other turnout gear. But for example, in maintenance and breathing gear, he asked for $3,500. And he has in this budget $3,000. In the next line item, building repairs and maintenance, he asked for $32,000. He was given $28,000.
Can I ask you what that's for?
The building maintenance?
Yeah, is that for some of the older stations?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, these stations are a lot of them are 35 years old, and they're just starting.
Is that the Tomlin Road one? Is that
No.
for the Tomlin?
No, that is not the Tomlin Road. That's going to be a significant,
Okay.
it itself's probably 3 to 4 times that amount.
Yeah, I didn't know I didn't look at the bids yet.
Well, I don't know exactly, but I think it's in that ballpark. But so the fire chief has asked for more money than he was given, but he was still given enough that he feels like he thinks that we're making progress toward what he needs to operate the department. We're not where he would like for us to be as far as funding the fire department, but he feels like this is a good step toward that.
Okay, so he's done basically the same thing, Sheriff. He's laid out a plan
Correct.
that's going to last for.
He's got a 5-year plan.
He's got a 5-year plan.
And this is the first year, but the first year of it, we haven't given him his $1 an hour increase.
So
that
we're
he's
kind of
asked.
kicking that down the road if we go along.
Right, we
We
got
are.
the plan back at our work session, so if you need another copy of it, we'll send it to you. So he laid out his
Yeah.
5-year plan.
Yeah, I remember that.
So this is a step towards funding the first year. It's not 100% the first year, so.
And another thing I want to add, I went to a house fire, knew the family the other day in Villarica, and the house was way off the road. Our fire department did an excellent job. I put it on my social media. And when you go out to a fire like that, we think about the fire truck or we think about the fire hose. Y'all, there were so many clamps and nozzles and switches and all this stuff that they had to get from the road all the way up to the house, besides the trucks that went up to the house. And so I think that was one thing in working and talking with the fire chief. A lot of these little things that you need, you know, maybe a clamp, and I'm just using that generically. You think about a fire hose, and maybe they ask for a fire hose, but you don't think about that clamp that puts the 2 hoses together for 1,000 foot. You don't necessarily think about that every time. And so to me, what the chief has kind of shown me, there's a lot of those integral parts that have not really been thought about or kept up like they need to be. And when you go out to a fire scene like I did in Villarica the other day, where the house is way, way off the road, and you see all the mechanisms that have to go into making the water be pumped all the way to the house, you have a new perspective for just how much goes into the equipment and maintenance and things that they need to keep that up. It's not just the fire truck and new tires for it and the water hose. It's so many other moving parts, and I think that's what the fire chief has kind of told us, is over time, a lot of those little integral parts that are needed have kind of been overlooked, and those just kind of add up at 1,000 here and 2,000 there, and I think that's where you're seeing a lot of these additional
That's right.
pieces added in.
And those components are a lot more expensive than tying 2 garden hoses together. I mean,
Right.
those things are, you know, several $100s. And you think, well, that's just 100 or that's just 200. But then you take 18 stations and you buy 2 of them, and it ends up over a year costing you a lot of money.
Right.
The other thing that I'd like to point out is that several years ago, we started using Narcan. And we're using more and more of it. And that's used when people are overdosing to keep them, to bring them back. And we do feel like it's necessary. I mean, it is necessary. But the county's having to buy that now, and it's, you know, so we need to provide for that in our budget. So it's just another one of those things that's out there that we need to do. But if we look at this, we've increased our budget by $513,000, which is a lot of money. But to really fund it the way the fire chief would like for us to, and give the $1 an hour raise and provide the benefits for all of that, we would need an additional $632,000 on top of what we have here to fund this thing the way he'd like to see it. And I think that that's in line based on the numbers that I've looked at for adjoining counties. We would still be behind the curve even if we did that.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier this morning, the fire chief's salary is not in this either.
That's correct.
So we technically do not have a fire chief in this budget. We have somebody doing a dual role. So if it was really going to be funded, you'd have to add the salary on top of that 632.
Which would make this look even worse to us, right?
Sorry to point that out. But
To get the dollar an hour, it's like 500,000, and you have 50,000 overtime.
Correct. And then you've got,
Because there is that much overtime.
they naturally work overtime in their regular work schedule, the way they work 24 on and 48 off. And may want to chime in, is it 3,073 hours a year?
3,023.
3,023 hours a year is a normal work schedule for them, the way they work 24 on and 48 off. So that creates overtime in each pay period that's just part of their compensation.
Well, I think you've probably done about as good as you can do on this. I mean, yes, are we really doing everything we'd like to see in this new plan? No, but we've picked out the critical things. And this, not saying the fire department hasn't had needs all along, but this was kind of new versus the sheriff's was the oldest one. So I think we're doing as best we can if we're going to try to take care of the sheriff and then giving the fire as best we can, considering this is one of the newest ones we've tried to approve, putting a real plan together.
Right.
Long term.
EMS and coroner, there's no real changes there. We'll move on unless you have questions. 800 megahertz, staying the same there. Animal services, we, on the salary line, we had a couple of options on that, and we decided to fund the more expensive option. This would include changing a part-time person to a full-time person, and there could be some adjustments made there, but we kind of feel like for the safety of the animal services that we would like to hold that option open in case we have to go to Plan B. We have added overtime for the correctional officer that has to work on the weekends. We can only get the medium security inmates, and so we have to have a CO out there. We can't take the low security people. We don't have low security inmates available for that time, so we've had to increase that. There again, we've got some trucks that have over 100,000 miles on them. They're starting to need some maintenance. We added some tablets that the officers can use in the field, and that required cell service. That increased our phone service. We increased their travel for training and their training line because there's some training that needs to happen out there. Their utilities are running lower than budget, so I took a little bit of money out there just trying to save some money in their budget. And then we're getting a $50,000 grant from Petco, which will offset the $50,000 in supplies and donated funds.
Michelle, I know you've been paying a good bit of attention out there, and you had hired KC to do some analysis for us, and I think we've had a lot of calls, or I have through the past year, of some issues out there, so I appreciate you trying to tackle and really take a close look at the department. I guess my question to you is moving from part-time to full-time, if you take that 20,000 out, you're basically looking at a net difference of an increase in 45,000. I can support you on that and knowing what you're trying to accomplish, and we don't want to go backwards on it, but I guess also looking at this as another piece, if we're trying to continue to come up with that money for the 400,000, is this something we could live without this year? Or is this something you still feel confident we definitely need to move forward?
Well, just so long as you all understand, when you have calls in the next year, there's not necessarily the personnel to do some of the stuff. So if you take it's really, like I said, well, it is 40,000, but you've got to find a lot of 40,000. But if we just leave that part-time position there, you understand that the services that we want to provide or the services that you want your constituents to have may not happen with a part-time person.
Well, like I said, I'm not trying to make you
we
feel
just,
bad. If you've been a little closer to the vest, obviously, and I just didn't know if you still, if you feel like we need to move
help
forward
out
with
there.
it.
It's a huge, I mean, you think about, 200 animals, you talk about the large family there again, and they've been running such a shoestring budget too. So we did, lots of y'all had questions back in the fall about the animal shelter, how it was running, things that weren't doing. So there we did, was very thankful that Karen was able to go take some time to spend out there, and we've got the 2 options to put back to you to decide, or no option at all. But anything we do cut or don't use in here, we all understand going forward that some services may not happen, but we do have a lot of 4-legged creatures out there that.
I'm glad, certainly we got Karen Curtis's insight into this, and I'm glad, thank you.
So it's just information for you, but we funded at the highest just because we didn't know which option you would or wouldn't like, you wouldn't, or which option you thought would be best. Sue believes that the less expensive option she can work with. She would rather just have, instead of putting a director out there and making the bigger plan that Karen had, to take that part-time to a full-time person. Sue believes she can work with that the best. So, but we did fund it at the highest just because at that time we still didn't have all this back information. So, and if you don't fund it at all, then we all recognize that we have another area that is a weakness and a liability. So,
Like I said, I just don't want to go backwards on the momentum you've been trying to make toward it, which I appreciate.
So it is, there, as you see, as we've gotten further and further into this, we have less and less revenue and more expenses. So Alicia did a great job on being very conservative in the revenue. We could have made it what we wanted it to make and given you a balanced budget, but it would not have been a secure and true budget. So now you're getting into the part that's not very fun.
One thing I found in Karen Curtis's report, I just throw this out there for information, I don't know, but she gave $1 per capita in the draft again. Douglas is $11.47 per capita, Coweta $7.56 per capita, Carroll is $6.46 per capita.
There again.
I also have Clark County in my revenue, so I like having Clark County included just because it's full of performance indicators, and I'm like, yes, it has so much data you want to look at sometimes on animal control. All kinds of data, how many cats they take in and how many this, that, and the other. But anyway, after Clark County, their budget was $798,000 for 2020, and that amounts to $6.26. So we're right there after Clark County. The one stark thing that stuck out, and I don't know what this means, but in her graph, she showed the number of animals taken in per year for each of them. And Carroll County takes in 4,443 animals. Coweta, I would expect them to be about the same. It's 1,436. So we're taking in 3,007, or more than 3 times more animals in Coweta County. And I'm like, why? Is that the problem? I mean, is there something process-wise that we're taking in more than 3 times as many animals to take care of in Coweta County?
I don't think Coweta takes in as owner surrenders.
What'd you say, Sue?
I don't think that Coweta County takes owner surrenders like
Well, she's got that note for Douglas, but she doesn't have that note for Coweta.
I think we're a lot rural too than Coweta, more rural area. People just got a dog in the yard and they breed and have puppies, and, you know, a lot of people I know that just leave their dog in the yard. They don't have a lot of interaction. And of course, they run off and breed another dog. We get those
Where I
puppies.
come from, is there something we could be aware of that we would take in less animals somehow, so we wouldn't have to take care of somebody, so we wouldn't have to have something like, but, I mean,
Spay and neuter.
yeah, but I just don't understand, and I'm not, maybe it's a question for the director, I'll take it over, why are we involved in taking care of 3 times as many animals as a
Well, I'm not sure it's her answer, it's more the citizens' answer. Somehow we have dogs and cats that don't have a home here in Carroll County for a reason he said, a reason that maybe we have a college and come May when they go home, mom and dad don't want them. I mean, there could be numerous reasons. I'm not sure we'd ever really know. But we do have a lot of dogs and cats, and I don't know how you stop that. I don't know what you do to make ours 1,300 versus 3,000, but we do have dogs and cats that need to be taken care of out there. And I think that was one of the things when she sent her plan in, that they want to be more of a shelter, not so much what we tend to think of as the pound from way back when, but more of a shelter that encourages people to keep them, help people. Like right now during the COVID-19, we've provided dog food, cat food to people in need in order for them to keep the dog and cat instead of bringing it to us to take care of. So she is moving towards more of sheltering, moving towards more of those kinds of programs to help people keep their animals, help educate the public on all their animals, but it takes more people to do things like that. So,
We probably get a lot of dogs dumped here because we do take care of them.
Could we educate more or something to?
I'm sure the Humane Society would love for you to join them because they are looking for volunteers, because that is one thing the Humane Society does try to do along with our animal shelter staff. But other than that, it takes volunteers, it takes someone to work with them. Animal control works with them. I mean, lots of times when they go out there, they try to educate, find out what's wrong, see what services we can provide to them in order that we don't bring the dog or the cat in. But
My
I don't-
recommendation would be for Alicia and the chairman to decide as you move and how we might can fund the sheriff's portion. So if you feel that we can leave it and you can somehow figure another plan to let us know how we're gonna fund the other, then we do. Or if you need that 10% to make up for that 400, then you take it out of here. It's an option. But I don't know that I can give it right this second because we don't even know exactly
Well, that's why
what
today's a work session. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, there again, get feedback to give you what, in all honesty, it was not my perfect plan to do it this way, but, looking back on it now, this is probably the perfect plan in the sense that before Sissy retired, she had spoken to all of you and you had checked off which departments you really wanted to sit down with, and some of these departments might not have been on your radar at the time, and you would have missed out on information. So by doing it this way, I know it's long and torturous, George, but because we have so many new ones on here, it's also the first time, I believe in the county government, we have been so transparent with this proposed budget, because these other meetings, like whoever wanted to meet with the animal shelter, might have been 2 of y'all and the department head, or this one might have been 2 different ones, so it wouldn't have been a publicized meeting by nature of the number of commissioners. So today, this is probably one of the best things we've done in a long time, in being so transparent with the budget needs and what we have to have, and that all 7 are hearing the same information than you would have if someone had come to the animal shelter department head meeting, if someone had just come to the public works. So as long and torturous as this might be for one whole day, we're all hearing the same message at the same time.
Well, I wouldn't disagree about the transparency part, but I would just add to that though, and this, you can't help this because of COVID.
No, but I actually kind of like this system.
But it does help though, when those department heads come to you and Alicia to present, that we would have the opportunity to hear. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we could advertise, if it's 3 days worth, you advertise 3 days worth of meetings. I mean, I would like to hear exactly what they're telling you and Alicia when they're presenting this forward, and not to intervene in your part to put together a balanced budget. That's not our job at that point, but it is sometimes hard not to hear. And yes, I can call them up and ask them, but it's just, if you're not in the original conversation, and this is something that George did when he was interim that was really helpful. There was only 4 of us, but to be able to hear, all of us could hear the same thing at once, that was really beneficial. So I'm not taking away from what you're saying, Michelle, I'm just saying that's important
But
too.
remember, that was just 4 of y'all, and it was not, the public could not.
Right.
So, anyway, all right, but that's the animal shelter, so we will leave in for, hey,
I've made a note, I guess we'll decide on what direction we
I
need
have
to
a feeling we're going to have to find a lot more than these fewer little items, but we'll go back with our homework on Monday.
go. Let's move on to emergency management. The biggest change there is the EMA program. We need some additional maintenance on our sirens and EMA training, and that training will be to meet GMO and FEMA mandates. And then we've cut some other things, made some adjustments for the 2020 actuals on that budget. Then on Public Works, the biggest request there from the Public Works Director was a service tech who is currently an inmate who has been working at the Public Works shop for quite some time now. He is going to be transitioning into a transition house, and he would like to continue to work at Public Works. At that point, the corrections department would bill us, and we would end up having to pay for his services. So there's a $40,000 increase in contractual services. Now, if we continue to keep him on after he finishes the transition program, we would have to move him, actually add ahead and move him into the salary line item.
So with him alone, I don't know, $40,000.
We're anticipating that that's going to be the cost of his salary and benefits that would be paid through the Department of Corrections. So I don't know the dollar. I don't remember the dollar amount per hour, but then you got Social Security on top of that. You got insurance and. So
You'd almost think that that's what he'd be hired in off the street maybe, and then if we're working through the correctionals programs, maybe it would be half price. I mean, and I'm not saying the gentleman's not worth more than 40, I'm just saying you would think through a program, it wouldn't necessarily be that high.
And I don't know that we know the exact dollar amount right now. That's what we're estimating at, so you may be right, it may come in a little lower. I don't know how these programs work. I've not experienced this before, so we'll have to see how this works out. I can tell you that he'll cost us more than $40,000 as an employee if we move him into a full-time employment situation down the road. So I guess I thought we were getting a pretty good deal, but maybe.
And maybe we are. I didn't mean any disrespect to him, but I'm just saying everybody at Public Works is not making $70,000 a year either. So I'm just saying that does seem like a pretty good number, pretty healthy number.
Yeah. Okay. We got some additional in gas and oil just because we're using more as we go along. Charles also asked for a $1,000 increase in uniforms and supplies. And then we have the 3 line items at the bottom for asphalt culverts and gravel, that are the money that we use for the intergovernmental work that we had the intergovernmental revenue for. And also when we go to put a culvert pipe in for an individual, that's where these expenses come from, and then they pay us for what we do for them too.
So there's somewhere that that's offset.
Yes. It's in,
And I just wanted to add again, I know I'd spoke about this at last year's budget and then again at the retreat we had this year, but when we do get to a point to where we're going to look at across the board raises again, I really feel strongly that a portion of public works should be considered for our own classifications, not chart of accounts, but public safety. I'd spoken with Charles, and I've spoken with Ann, and I think with Avery, just told them, you know, I think mainly Ann and Charles, though, trying to come up with a list of what would that employee list look like. It's just hard for me to think that these gentlemen not only go out in the middle of the night sometimes, but if they're having to deal with a storm or they're having to be on the front line, even in their normal course of work, you know, they have to keep the roads up for the fire truck to be able to go down it and the ambulance. All the things that they do are either emergency in the moment of public safety, or they're aiding and assisting our first responders or frontline workers to be able to do their job. So I've asked them if they would come up with a list that hopefully, I understand we can't really adopt anything today, and I'm not asking for a dollar amount. I'm just simply saying, to reinforce what I've been saying in the past, I really feel strongly that we should consider a certain portion of them if we move forward in classifying with additional raises and we prioritize with public safety. I'd like to see a portion of that department included for the reasons I just explained and I've explained before.
okay. And right below there, you'll see the solid waste collection. We got another 5% increase from DFL, who's the company that moves the waste from the convenience center to the transfer station. So we got increase there, and then we got an increase for the amount. We're actually moving more tonnage from the convenience centers to the transfer station. So we've got increases in both of those places.
Alicia, I want to say something about that. I want to give an example, and this is another area that we may have to consider looking at revenue from a user service standpoint, and not necessarily just on the back of a taxpayer per se, but this is a service that most people utilize. So you take the city of Villa Rica, you get a certain size rolling can, it's $14 a month, times 12 months, that's $168. So you get a certain amount you can put out there, and then they pick it up. You don't have to do anything. So let's say you cut that in half for having to drive it to the dump yourself, right? In other words, you're not having somebody, it's not coming and picking it up, you're taking it somewhere. So now you're down to $84. So then let's say we half that again in two and come down to $42 for maybe the fact that you're having to handle the garbage yourself. I mean, if we just took in $42 a year for a sticker or something, and I know this has been discussed before amongst the board, I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. And I'm not even looking at it as, oh, well, let's just find some place to get money. But y'all, I mean, I could go right now and take 12 truckloads to the dump, as long as it fit in the categories, and dump every bit of that for free. But then it's going to show up on this line item that you just $101,000 increase, not total, but increase. At some point, and I know there's other counties around us that charge something similar. I've seen some that put it on like a tax bill, $60 or $80. You can get one for your home and it lasts the whole year. But at some point, this is the kind of stuff that I think we've got to start considering. If everybody else is charging, and you get this little bitty whatever, okay, but I can drive 12 truckloads in one day for free of trash, something's not adding up about that. And this is a serious area that I think we really need to look at. I mean, we're talking about revenues, we're talking about how are we going to continue to afford all these things. These are the type things that, yes, while these may be homeowners that would have to pay this too, it's not necessarily just a tax, it's a usage. It's that trash has to go somewhere. And if we keep on at this rate of that much tonnage, and then we're paying not only for the tonnage increase, but we're paying to have it transported from the convenience centers to our landfill, and then we're transporting it from there to where it's actually going to end up. At some point, these costs are going to be unsustainable at zero cost to the people that are utilizing the service. And I know people pay taxes, and I get that, but people pay taxes that have their garbage picked up too for $14 a month, with only a small portion that you can put in it in a week's time. So I just think that's something we need to be very mindful of, and let's don't kick this can down the road for 12 more years and figure out. This may be something that we need to look closely at, just like we were talking about with the state court. You know.
Would you like to chair that ad hoc committee? Well, I mean, we have these discussions and nobody ever, they just comment and they don't ever do anything with it. So why don't I put you in charge of figuring out how other counties do it and how we are to charge these people? Because there's that other thing that if you don't provide the service, what are they going to do with their trash? Throw it out on the side, go find the Walmart, the convenience stores. I mean, so there's a whole bigger picture. So I will put you in charge. If anyone else would like to serve with him on trash, is anybody else that would like to? But I mean, that's part of the purpose of this board is that, staff has a lot to do already. And if you have an idea, you bring it, you research it. Steven brought some of his stuff. So I need you to bring the stuff to the table when you have the idea. So you're right, we've talked about it every year, but nobody's ever brought a plan to, so I will put you in charge of researching. If anybody wants to serve with you, if not, find some.
If I get a lot of calls about the convenience center down here by the technical school.
Yeah.
I think.
We have a lot of trash lately, a lot of.
And I think it's because people are calling, and they're bringing, all of a sudden they're cleaning out rooms, deciding to have all, let's go buy new couches. I mean, that thing's just running over.
Yeah, we've been watching that pretty closely, but yes, how to fund that.
I got a call too about, not this one down here, got this roundabout, but as well as one near me in Lowell, like just running over, and I'm like, so when I pull it there, I talk to the guy, and, so he's telling me, well, yeah, they typically pick it up once a day. I'm like, well, once a day is fairly frequent, but they are going to be full. I've got complaints out there, like, you guys please do something. I mean, I don't know where to put my trash. And then the guy is always telling me, oh, you can't tell people to put their trash over the metal container or whatever, so everything. And, but, another thing that he was low was commercial guys coming in there with a bunch of stuff like old cargo lanes full of stuff, and he tries to stop them, and they leave down the road, and he has no authority to actually stop them, and they come there and he's loading all this stuff, go into the trash. I mean, so he said, I called the sheriff, I called, and nobody, he has no authority, he says, to stop that type of improper activity with traffic. So that's another thing, it's like, I'm wondering how much that's going on. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, maybe you need to be on the committee with Steve
I'm
and
gonna put
I.
Ernie with you.
It's a real smell good committee.
I think the three of y'all on another committee, so y'all could just get together all day long and start one in the morning, one at lunch, and one in the afternoon. I'm not
get
being
a bonus
sarcastic,
too
I'm being,
for that.
we need,
I got water.
And because y'all are the ones that vote on these budgets, it needs to be, you know, you're presenting the solutions that you think are best based on what you know, then,
Well, I've got one last comment I promised about tax office. But what has anyone thought about the novel idea? I mean, there are some functions in government you cannot privatize. That is one that there are firms out there already doing. Will we end up then privatizing that function than continuing to let it languish as our own? I mean, we have to have contractual indicators in place and so on. But I mean, could we do it cheaper through a contract service than we can with our own staff? And that's the only one. No, I'm not for privatized government. But, I mean, I'm for looking at efficiencies, and that is one that sticks out like a sore thumb or a sore arm. That possibly we could do better privatizing that. So we want to be on the ad hoc, but that's just something I thought of. Like, we've never privatized any other function. I mean, I couldn't even fathom privatizing anyway. But with that one, I think we could certainly look at privatizing. So, I'm with you on the ad hoc committee. I know we're trying to make improvements there. I applaud the effort, but in addition to the improvement, is there viability in privatizing that function? There are firms out there, and sitting in BOE meetings, I know for a fact that the GMAS people who are there at the BOE meetings, when the BOE board members look to them for support and interaction at those meetings, the GMAS staff have their ducks in a row. They can facilitate the meeting. They can provide the documentation. Typically, much better than several, although some of them, the tax assessors are fine, but several of them can't do it like UMass people can. So I'm just throwing that out as privatizing that might be some area where we can reap efficiency. I would not do it if it's going to cost us more, but if it's going to cost us substantially less, is that an area that we should look at?
One area, and maybe that is, I will say one thing that I have heard through time is a lot of people, I think we're basically subbing out the commercial end, right? Right now, we
That's
don't
right.
have that. But
Yeah.
one of the concerns I've heard about that, not that we need somebody that lives here for a good old boy system,
Right.
but if you live here, you understand the dynamics of maybe certain areas and how things, and maybe that even adds to your ability to help make things more accurate versus I just drove down here from Alpharetta and I plug in my little whatever and there's the value. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I do think that's one thing I've heard about the privatization of just the commercial end. There's been some concerns that there's not as much thought about the actual area of Carroll County by nature because the person doesn't even live here. So I don't know if that would be a part of what you're talking about as well that would be considered even if that was needed.
Well, the commercial QMAS guy, in fact, does live here, so there are folks in the area that are on private.
Yes.
So, you know, with a contract, you don't, as long as you monitor it appropriately, and that's very important. I mean, you don't have to pay several things that we have to pay with full-time employees. So, just a thought. Like I say, I'm not for privatizing government, I'm not, you know, but just for that isolated function.
Where we at?
we're on health centers and general clinics now.
Okay, the change on this page is in the transit program. There again, we're recognizing the revenue miscellaneous and recognizing the expenses here. Prior to this year, we've always just offset these expenses with the revenue, so now we're showing them as two separate line items. So the net effect of this is that the transit program will continue to cost the county $35,000 a year, which is the amount that it has always cost. There's no other changes on that sheet. On the next sheet that has Carol Casa, there's no changes on it. Then we get to the recreation department. Now, the recreation department, we have cut some expenses there because we cut our revenue there, so we've also tried to cut some expenses. The largest of which is the concessions. And when we took a look at the concessions, we weren't even breaking even on it. So we're going to take another look at our concessions. We're going to try to make sure that our inventories are taken and kept up with the way they're supposed to be, and maybe try to restart the concession thing. We're not going to be cooking food now because of COVID. I think all of our food will be prepackaged. We just don't, the recommendation is not to cook food in a concession type area. We've also reduced some costs associated with gymnastics because we feel like gymnastics revenue will be down some because of COVID. We did increase physicals a little bit. The director wanted that for some new hires. We've also increased training, and we've also increased contractual services for the increase in Civic Plus, which is our software that we use for recreation. The next grouping down at the bottom is the money that we pay back to the cities for their county people participating in city rec departments. And so that stayed the same.
Alicia, are you saying that prior COVID-19 that the concessions were not even breaking even?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't know if the chairman would allow me to get, I don't want a committee, but get involved in that. I mean, that should be making us money. It may not make us 100,000, and I know we're in a special situation with COVID, but in a ballpark, in a gymnastics center, if that's done right, that should always be in the black, because you've got a controlled audience that will pay. I'm not saying we want to rip anybody off, but they'll pay $3 for a Coke instead of driving and coming back to get the 99-cent one at QT. There's no reason, the way those facilities are set up, that we should not be making
We
money
agree
off of
with
that.
that, and that's,
Something's happening with the inventory.
well, that's,
We're
that's,
working on that.
we've put some people in charge of
Okay.
looking at those situations to determine what needs to happen to make.
And I'm not even insinuating that somebody's stealing money. I'm just simply saying there's an art to running that type of business within
right.
the government.
That's right.
And it can easily make money if someone knows how to articulate the operations of it.
Yeah, if you're pricing your stuff less than what you're paying for it, you're not gonna make money. And so somebody's gotta take a look at that and take a look at what we paid for a Coca-Cola and say, okay, we paid $1, we're gonna charge $1.25. We can't pay $1.25 and get $1. It doesn't work that way.
They're working
So,
on that.
Who's running it?
Ginger?
Yeah, the
Well, I mean,
rec-
not name, I mean, is it
oh,
a recreation department?
Yes.
recreation
Yes.
department runs their own concession
They've got
stands
their
out
own
there,
concession
yes.
stand,
Yes.
they've got-
And we're gonna work on,
employees working.
well, we're gonna
Yes.
work on getting the internet out there to the concession stand locations, so before they're not able to take any debit or credit cards, they've only been cash only. But, so there's a lot that, they're looking at right now while there's some downtime at the rec department. So those things are being addressed now.
I'd love to see a plan after they put it together. I'd like to just, I don't even have to meet with them, but I'd love to see a document if they formalize the plan on paper that I could look at when they do that.
So David Thor and I had the wrestling, we did the track program over at the high school. And that's unfunded track, you know, you don't make any money, so you gotta, so was not making any money. We went, what, I mean, because the gym held 1,000 people. We filled it up every time we had this at the old gym. You know, there's something wrong here, so we kicked the booster club out. And we took it over. And we made more money for track. I mean, the athletic director started coming to us and saying, you guys don't need that much money. And he started taking money out of track program and putting it in another program. So, and I mean, it doesn't take a genius to run a concession stand. It's inventory control.
You want to tell you the number one secret, and I'll shut up about concessions, about how you charge? Everything's on the dollar. It's either $2 for a Coke or it's $3 a Coke. It's not $2.25 or it's not $2.75 or it's not 25 cents, $1.25, and $3.25. It's $1, $2, $3, $4. And keeping that even, that's one of the number one attributes to making something make money is you deal away with the coin change.
Put draft beer in, $6 cut.
Did y'all cover transit and health, all that while
We must have.
We did. The only thing on that, the only change was there again, like I put in the email to y'all, that it's an accounting issue with the transit. It's still 35,000. That's it. That's all we'll get billed. And they reimburse us for the fuel and stuff like that. So it's still just 35,000. It just on paper looks different. Okay, so that's rec. Now we're going over to parks.
So in parks, we're wanting to add a maintenance person, and we had a little bit of extra money in there because we still had the director in at a full amount on the budget. So we could actually cut the budget a little bit and bring a maintenance person in there. And then they're asking for an increase for some part-time people. Now when full-time people take off, we don't always have somebody to cover, and they feel like they need some extra money for full-time. This is assuming that we get back to a regular schedule out there too. They requested some additional equipment and repairs and maintenance money. They're dealing with older equipment and older vehicles there too. They've also seen an increase from AT&T, so we're going to look at some of the options as far as phone for them. Additionally, they've asked for $4,000 in additional expense for termite control at the group lodge, Clem, and security systems for Clem and John Tanner. And then they've asked for some additional non-office supplies for cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and spray and splash chemicals. And then some additional money for utilities just to meet the increases at Clem and Little Tallahassee.
Michelle, how does our purchasing work? So like every facility probably has to have paper towels, for instance. Is all that bought like in bulk and then we can buy it as we need it if we commit to so much? I mean, how does that work?
Well, Janice handles the purchasing, and so she keeps an inventory. And so she tries to buy, I mean, we don't want to keep too much in inventory, but we want to try to keep an adequate supply. And then she works with several different suppliers to see where she can get it at the best price. Hopefully, the best price and keep it local. That's our objective. And then when parks need something, we can take it out to them. They can come by and pick it up as they're bringing stuff into us. Same thing with office supplies. I mean, everything has some inventory to it, and then she expenses it out. Every time she pulls something out of inventory, she makes a ticket for it, and at the end of the month, she totals up all those tickets for each department, and it gets allocated back to them.
And I guess where I'm going with this, in other words, we're not buying 6 different types of soaps for 6 different types of soap dispensers. In other words, do we have any rhyme or reason as we service all of these buildings, or we add new buildings? I mean, or do we look at things from that perspective, that she's not having to fill 6 different soaps from 6 different, you see what I'm saying? Are things, is there some kind of uniformity to things that we use on a constant basis? I guess that's more my direct question.
And I don't know, I mean, I know all the soap dispensers in the historic courthouse are the same because I use them, but as far as at parks and other places, I don't know if there's.
And that may sound silly, but in other words, you may have a soap dispenser to refill the container at the commission office that maybe is $7 a unit, I'm just making that up, and then the one somewhere else at Parks is a different design and it's only $2. That's kind of where I'm going as far as trying to be efficient in that we're still getting soap, but are we trying to, every time we do something, we have 19 different types of soap dispensers that we have to try to, and maybe some of them are way more expensive just because of the design.
Yeah.
We probably have a whole bunch of different ones because you think about how the buildings have been built over the years. So if we wanted to go and make every soap dispenser in every county facility the same, we probably need to put a line item in and purchase every single one of them. But when it comes to the paper towels, the toilet paper, the cleaning supplies, the pens, the inks,
That's
all that
universal.
stuff is, you know, it is accounted for.
All right, let's move on to ag services. We've moved some things around just to get them matched up with how we're expensing them. And then, we have added $1,000 to the telephone. We are checking with some other vendors to see if we can, cut that amount down, which I hope to do, but that wasn't confirmed at the time of this budget, so I added it in there in case we can't negotiate a better price. But ultimately, they cut their budget $1,396 for next year, so I think we're okay there. Planning and zoning, the $118,000 that we paid at Three Rivers is a state requirement. We pay $1 per person in Carroll County to fund the Three Rivers Regional Commission. And I think there were 12 of those commissions throughout the state that each county is a member of, and they're all funded by the county. Michelle, did you want to add about the municipalities? Did you want to talk about that?
Okay, so in a service agreement, service delivery agreement that was done, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago, one of the things we do, we pay for the city. So we're paying the whole $118. We're paying for every citizen. Other counties may do it differently in that the cities pay for their citizens and the county pays for the unincorporated part. But in the last service delivery agreement, Carroll County has picked up the bill for that entire dollar amount. Can't be changed until we get ready to renegotiate that. So that's where we are right now, somewhere along the way. We're providing something. We're providing something else for our citizens that isn't necessarily fun or that they recognize. Unlike, you know, with municipalities, they can get the amps, they can get the arts, they can get some of all the fun stuff, and we're left with things that, you know, aren't naturally fun, but it's a desperate, you know, a service that has to be provided. So that's the $118,000 there that we can negotiate at some time in the future.
I guess that'll change with the census.
It'll change with the census and, yeah.
You say renegotiate, we get the cities to start paying. part of
Right,
that.
but that would have to be in the next service delivery agreement. Is that what, 2 years from now, Stacy? I think it's,
Census comes out.
Yeah, it's after the census.
so we have to wait to have that done. So that's non-negotiable at this point, but, you know, Three Rivers, if you go on their website, they do provide a lot of services that probably most citizens don't realize that this is what pays for what they have, if that makes any sense. I mean, from a lot of senior citizen services, Meals on Wheels, I mean, it just, the age, I mean, that there's just so many categories that Three Rivers covers and provides us resources and services, but we just don't, I guess they don't stick a sticker on there that says paid for by Carroll County, but it's paid for by Carroll County.
When we get down into the planning and zoning enforcement, when we went through the recession, Ben cut his staff back pretty significantly in codes enforcement. And with the agreement that he could add back a building inspector at the time that it was needed. And with all the new construction that's going on, he's wanting to fund that position. Now, he's hired some new people and didn't hire them at the rate that he had the older people at, or the previous people at, so he saved some money in his budget along the line. So actually, it'll take about $7,000 to fund that new building inspector, which he needs at this point. He's also put a temporary line item in there for a guy that uses some. He's used him some in parks, and he's used him some in the building inspection area. And so we put some money in there for that. They have moved to a new software package called iWorks, and they quoted it out, and it increased $2,500 a year. So we got that cost in there. There again, he's got some older vehicles. His maintenance is increased there. And then he's got the zoning application packages that he's having to send out to the board members. With the increase in zoning, he's seen an increase in office supply and expense. So he's asked for an increase there of $3,500.
Is that something we might want to consider, buying them a $500 laptop times 7 board members is $3,500? I mean, I'm just asking.
No, I had already asked that too, because back when I made the Board of Commissioners go green, we looked at that for planning and zoning. A lot of the problem is more the internet service, and we're now seeing that even with having Steve added to this board, the lack of internet service in some areas. So the iPad wouldn't necessarily solve their problem. It's the lack of the internet service.
Okay.
In some of the
Which
places
goes back to the whole thing about technology, we're behind in general.
Well, and you know,
I'm having 2 kids at home with no internet service and then doing all what they call it distance learning. And we don't have service in my house. So we end up having to get a little hotspot. But we don't have enough data for them both to work at the same time. So Caleb's got to do his work, and then Taylor's got to do hers, and, you know, there you are. So, it's deeper than just Carroll County.
It is.
It's the service, availability of services. So.
I'm not questioning that they may not need this extra position at all, but I guess my question is, I mean, the economy's been booming for about 3 years, so is construction just, I mean, I don't know Tommy's world with actual construction, but I mean, is he just now saying I can't do it anymore? I mean, it's not like all of a sudden we're coming out of a recession. We've had 3 years of booming. Is it just they put it off, or?
I think he's put it off as long as he can. I mean,
okay. But you see what I'm saying? It's not like we're just now, typically you think of when you're coming out of something, you're adding, not 3 years into a good economy, and then all of a sudden I need a new building inspector or whatever.
well, you know, Ben's done really well at containing cost and pulling back. I mean, he took a big hit in his department back several years ago when we needed some extra money. and he had some people leave. He didn't replace them, and he's done everything he can to keep from replacing them, but now is the time that he needs to get that person back. And then the next page is the final page. We've got the increase in debt service to meet the additional payments that are being due for the DFAX building. And there were amortization schedules that were sent out to support this, but this is just the increase according to the loan agreement.
Okay, so we are at 4:30. We said this would be scheduled until 5 o'clock. Are there any questions that were not answered? Let's address those right now by chance. Anything that you had on your list that was not addressed as we went through this line by line?
Can I ask a couple questions about the SPOS side?
Well, let's wait on that for the simple fact that I want to do the budget because we did not advertise a SPOS conversation. So let's get the budget taken care of. We will be having more meetings. I mean, we'll have the work session, we'll have the June 2nd meeting, we'll have the budget amendment, and Stacy had sent out to y'all earlier a calendar, a time schedule for SPOS. So there will be more discussions, but for the time's sake of the budget that we advertised, can we have any questions that were not answered going through this?
Is the Gerald's old position, the operations, I knew at one time the position was still there. Is it still there, or is it there plus funded, or there and non-funded, or?
Well, heads are always, well, I hate the word heads, but I can't, somebody taught me that. So it is still in there, the position is.
Alicia, is it funded or non-funded?
Yes, it's funded.
It's funded.
Yes.
There's some money.
But it can come out, I mean, I didn't even,
There's some money.
I mean,
How
there's
much is that? I don't
we
there's a
didn't
lot
fund
of
it
things
last
that he
year. I
does-
mean, we
that
did
he
not
does.
fund it, so we cannot fund it again.
I mean, there's a lot of things he does that are either not getting done. I mean, some of the things that you've asked about would be things that he would follow up on, that now we just don't have we just don't have the personnel to.
Hey,
cover
I
anymore, so-
from day one said Gerald was gonna be, I'm not
yeah.
asking, I'm
No,
just
I'm-
simply saying, I didn't know, because last year it was non-funded,
Right.
and that's why I was asking,
So we
just
could
is the
take
money
that
there or
out.
not?
Possibly too, as we
And we
continue to
actually need the
navigate.
money. We need it. Michelle, not on the budget, but could I ask a question about the property that we had jointly with the city of Carrollton?
Yes, we, didn't I send y'all an email?
Esco Way,
Huh?
Esco Way,
Up.
behind Jordan Truck Sales.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that's been sold.
It
And-
has?
And we have brought that money back in.
We do get our money
I
back.
went and picked that check up the minute JR told me. I ran down to the city hall and picked it up. through the
Okay,
window,
but it's not
brought it right
reflected in
back.
this, right?
Um,
None, or did it go into the
It goes
general
into-
fund, or did it go into,
I can't remember, we had some discussion about both ways. because
would you let me know?
I will. It
Thank
came
you.
out
Came out of, I think, didn't we do that out of, did we
Yes.
do it out of Supply?
yes.
Yes.
Whenever we were doing the feasibility study and building another.
Yeah,
something of
a
this
venue,
nature.
we're gonna build
This
a
all happened
venue.
right at the beginning of the COVID when it got sold. But, all right, so we've had that discussion. Do we put it back in SPOS, which I personally feel like we should put it back in SPOS.
Yeah, if that's where it's gotta go, yeah.
However, I don't know the legal end of it or the auditors. I think that was where we left it. Is
Yeah.
I can't remember where we put it. We made a decision about where to put it, and I can't remember.
Right,
It
right.
is in the bank.
But yeah, it's in the bank.
I'm just wondering if we could use it. Can it be used? I mean, other than,
Yeah,
or it has to be used for Splice?
if we put it back in SPOS, it'll have to
Be used for
SPOS.
Splice project?
That's
Okay,
correct.
that's good,
That's correct.
that's
Well,
good.
the one thing I was going to summarize at
Now-
the end, because I talked about possibly using some 2020 money that would take money out of this budget, and there would be about $106,000 of radio replacement equipment, sheriff equipment, computers, copiers, turnout gear, other equipment purchases and furnitures and fixtures, if we bought that out of the 2020 money, that would free up money to go back into a contingency line item or fund some other money that we need in the budget, if we have some extra money in 2020. And I would like to see that possibly done. Then you got the 100,000 in pictometry, and these are just things that I'm suggesting. I'm not saying we should, I think that we should, that's what I'm suggesting, but that'll be for you to decide. And then we got the $600,000 in public works money, that we potentially could leave in the general fund instead of taking SPOS money. And then the one last thing, I just want to throw this out there so that you have some numbers to think about. But if we did the same bonus structure that we did in 2018, it would cost us about $690,000 if we did a bonus out of any excess money left from 20. $690,000 to pay a one-time bonus. To all of our employees. And that would be the same bonus structure that we used in 2018. And I don't have all the details, but essentially the full-time people got $1,000 apiece, and the part-time people, based on how long they had been here, got a fraction of that. And then people that had been here less than 6 months didn't get the full bonus, but they got a little bit, I think. But that's just a number I wanted to throw out there. So if we get to the end of this thing and we do have some surplus money, and you want to fund, since we aren't funding across the board raise, or if y'all want to know how much it would cost to fund an across the board raise, I'll be glad to give you that information too. It wasn't in this budget and I wasn't prepared, but if that's something y'all want to entertain,